Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here, 9 o'clock on a Monday, for our last week of budget hearings. And I know you're going to miss it. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways, and Means Committee to order for March 6th. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any personal orders or announcements? Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the committee, thank you for breakfast this morning and treating us. We greatly appreciate it. It was a good treat. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's your reward for hanging in. Any other personal orders or announcements? Seeing none, we have 5 budget hearings scheduled this morning. So without objection, we're out of session. And our first presenter is the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. Commissioner Turner, if you want to come forward and bring your folks and introduce yourselves. Welcome and thank you for being here as our wake-up call for this last Monday of budget hearings.
Well, we're certainly going to try to set a high bar for everybody to chase, Madam Chair. So thank you for having us. To my left, I've got Deputy Commissioner Andy Kidd, and to my right, I have Deputy Commissioner Jordan Allen. Certainly very excited to be here. Appreciate this committee's support in our department, understanding what we do, serving the most vulnerable Tennesseans. So I want to say thank you as we kick this off. Really excited about what our budget presentation is going to look like. Happy to answer any questions, but we feel this is a very strong fiscal budget and it serves Tennesseans at a very high level. So excited about that. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Kidd and we'll get started on our presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. And good morning, everyone. The first line item that we have is the Tennessee Strong Families Respite Care. We're going to utilize some of our existing vacant community homes to place some of the children that are in foster care that don't currently have a foster placement, that are also have a diagnosis of IDD. So this is a landing spot for them, hopefully to get them out of either offices or hospitals as a step down, so that we can provide that care and then hopefully find them with a foster family to move into. The next is number 2, the placement stability, also with Tennessee Strong Families in collaboration with the Department of Children's Services. This is very similar to our Katie Beckett program, where we have, this is a funding for the foster families for wraparound supports. So we'll operate it very similar to the Katie Beckett program. Number 3 is the Tennessee Strong Families Network Development. This is where we're going to try to build out a provider development for the network for those children that currently need some type of residential treatment facility, but there's not that in the state. Next up is the provider rate and for nurses and independent support coordinators. This is a provider rate increase there. Next up is the Medicaid Alternative Pathways positions. This is 6 positions. We're going to utilize existing funding for this program, but we did need the position authority. I'm going to turn it over to Jordan to give a quick update on MAPS.
Yes, good. Excuse me. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The Medicaid Alternative Pathways program launched in November of last year, targets youth in schools between the ages of 15 and 22, seeking to teach them to utilize technology to travel independently in their communities, develop skills that allow them, hopefully, to need us a little bit less. As Commissioner Turner says all the time, we're winning when we work ourselves out of a job, and this program is actively doing that today. So these positions will be to further expand it. We started in Middle Tennessee. We've now opened up in West and East Tennessee, and these positions will continue to support that program.
Thanks, Jordan. The next one is for regional crisis growth, and this is for our START teams. These folks help with when there's a behavioral crisis and where there's co-occurring diagnosis of individuals. So this will help absorb the growth that we've seen in the response for those individuals. The next is a DSP wage increase. This will take the DSP average wage to $14.44. Very excited about that amount. Next up is the Seating and Positioning Clinic. We currently have a director in Middle Tennessee and East Tennessee, but we needed one in West Tennessee. And so this is a position to be the director in West. Next up is a quality assurance position. We have one position, and this is to focus on our Tennessee Early Intervention System. We've expanded that program, and so we needed an additional quality assurance person. Next up is major maintenance, and that is a 39,000 additional into our major maintenance fund. And first up is a state-operated ICF community homes. We're closing those down just so that we can use those for the DCS children. Next up is the Harold Jordan Center, and this is a reduction. I'll turn it over to Jordan to give an update on that.
Yes, members of the committee, over the last couple of years, we've gradually reduced our FTE count and programming through the Harold Jordan Center, developed other opportunities to provide that treatment. These are individuals that frequently have been involved with the legal system, co-occurring diagnosis, very difficult to support. And now that capacity has been built around us, so we're downsizing a little bit, hopes to utilize the physical space that we have for other endeavors that we're discussing right now.
Thanks, Jordan. The next two are for waiver attrition and waiver utilization reductions. Those are typical year-over-year reductions. And then the last is for the TEIS funding swap, and this is where we've received a federal grant, and so we are reducing the state portion and increasing the revenue for the federal side. With that, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner.
Thanks, Andy. Madam Chair, that's our budget presentation. We're certainly happy to answer any questions from the committee.
All right, thank you. That was concise. We have a number of questioners, but I'm going to start off with just some clarifying points. If we could go back to your first slide. On the strong families, you mentioned it a couple of different places. I'm sorry, the second one, yeah. This movement or effort to provide more beds for youth. But what happens, youth do grow older. So what are we doing to make sure that our adult population continues to be served?
Well, it's a great question. That's exactly what we're focusing on there. So the vast majority of this focus is creating the right continuum of care to make sure that we don't miss anyone. So the reason that we started having these conversations with DCS was acknowledging that there's a significant need there in the foster care system for children with disabilities that then grow up, to your point, to become adults with disabilities. So I'll let Jordan talk about it in greater detail, but there are multiple programs that we have that we're starting to build into the school systems and the children a little bit earlier than we historically have around technology and maps and some of these programs that will allow them to experience independence and live independently if they choose to do so, that historically we've never done before, but we are not going to sacrifice one for the other. So I think your question is, how do we guarantee that we continue maintaining a high level of care for adults in the same manner that we're wanting to focus on children? And we're committing to do that because we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs for everyone that is inside our service delivery system and not just picking and choosing kind of who the winners and losers are. So I'll let Jordan talk a little bit about what our programmatic setup looks like.
Yeah, Commissioner hit most of the points there. The intent is to try to leverage the experience and candidly the efficiency of our provider network to get to children, get to folks before they become adults and enter the system, utilize a lot of the same programming techniques. Commissioner mentioned the word continuity. That's the intent here. We want to be able to provide the same kind of continuous best practice approach to young people, hopefully shepherding them into adulthood. And what we've seen from a data perspective, not just here, but nationwide, is that then sometimes prevents them from long-term, lifelong reliance on programs like ours and like the state in general. So the intent is just to get in as early as we can, obviously alleviate a need for DCS that's present now, but focus on those young people with intellectual disability and allow us and our provider network to try to have impact earlier.
So are we currently serving all adults who need those kinds of services? Do we have adequate care and adequate facilities for them? Because there's a couple of different places where we're talking about converting facilities that were formerly for adults to children, if I understood you correctly.
Yes, ma'am. So thankfully, I'm happy to report that the state of Tennessee does not currently have a waiting list. As many of the members of the committee know, we've talked about waiting lists for years and years. We will, I'm sure, experience a waiting list again in the future. But to your point, Madam Chair, the space that we're utilizing for these young people that are in hospitals right now are currently vacant beds. So this is the state has long operated a program for adults in these homes. As that need has diminished, the reason it's diminished is our provider community, our private provider community, has become more adept at supporting people with a high level of need. And as those beds have gone vacant, this attempt will be to repurpose not only the physical space, but the staff that we have that in some cases have spent the last 20 years treating people with really high medical acuity. And so we want to leverage their experience and use the space.
And so just again, for clarity, and this, I promise this is my last question. I'm going to let other people begin, but the beds that we're talking about converting or redirecting, whatever the appropriate term would be, those are state beds and not private provider beds. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you. Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. Last year, this committee heard a lot about adult changing tables, which is something we never thought we'd hear a whole lot about. I certainly hadn't up until last year. And so I was wondering if you could give us an update really on that $1 million funding appropriation that we did, what the process has been like, and what the utilization looks like going forward. If you could share a little bit about that, it'd be great.
Sure. I'll speak to it real quick and then let Deputy Commissioner Kidd give you some of those specifics. But I hope the committee takes some pride in this, because when that money was allocated our department, within a week or two, I had no less than 4 different states reach out to me asking me, how in the world did you guys do this? Because it's just an unspoken conversation that should be happening that people don't think about. So not only are we working very closely with private businesses and communities and our partners on the Council of Developmental Disabilities, we've also seen other states that are looking at Tennessee again as a leader in this space to try to figure out how do they do what they need to do. And we're also working very closely with TDOT and making sure that some of these adult changing tables are installed at rest stops all across the state. That has created enormous traction for us in the nationwide conversation about decency and dignity for individuals that might need assistance in a changing room. So I hope the committee is really proud about that, because Andy's going to provide some numbers, I think, that reflect not only the desire and the will of the legislature, but also the impact that it's having in your local community. So Andy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Commissioner. We tried to make the application process as simple as possible. I think it's 8 or 9 questions, so very easy to apply. You can do it online. We've had over 50 applications. We've awarded, I believe, 27 grants at this point, and they're still rolling in. The last couple of months, we've seen a heavy roll in. In fact, this morning I received 2 more. So, they're coming in on a daily basis, but I believe it's 27 is how many that we've actually executed, and we're in the process of evaluating the others to get those contracts set up.
Thank you. Just as an aside, I mean, I guess $1 million seemed like a lot of money for us at the time. I just wondered, of the 27 that you approved, what's the average per price, or how many changing tables do you think can be done for $1 million?
Yes, sir. The cap there is $5,000 per grant. And so typically that's about the cost of the changing table itself. They're running around $4,000. And so this has a little buffer for any construction or any work that needs to be done there too. So we have had some companies, if there's a large construction change, that they say, well, this is a bit much for us. We can't afford the rest of it. It's nice to have the table, but we can't do it right now. So that's the feedback that we've heard from a dollar standpoint. If they already had the restroom that's able and it's big enough, most companies have been able to do it for right around $4,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner Turner, it's great to see you and your team here this morning. I've got a little trivia for the committee. Commissioner Turner and I, along with new Representative Robert Stevens, were all elected to the Rutherford County Commission together in 2010. Turns out state government is a great way to get rid of county commissioners.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions about your budget, though.
Sure.
The current budget includes some position cuts, 55 cut positions for the Harold Jordan Center and 43 reduced positions at state community homes. And I guess my question is, how will eliminating these positions affect your department's ability to provide various services?
Sure. I will answer that at a very high level and let Andy talk a little bit about that. We're very confident that that will not impact level of service. And frankly speaking, we would, excuse me, we would never jeopardize the service of individuals that we're accountable for by cutting positions like that. But we're very confident that this will not impact level of service. So I'll turn it over to Andy and let him kind of give some color to that too.
Absolutely, Representative. The 43 position reduction is actually the same as the 43 additional positions that we're asking for in the cost increase. It's just we're changing the position class, and so it most transparent to reduce one class and then increase another class. And so there'll be no reduction in overall services with those two reduction and cost increases together. For the 55 with the Harold Jordan Center, we're actually closing down the Behavioral Stabilization Unit and the ICF portion of the Harold Jordan Center. So the Behavioral Stabilization Unit will be the trouble that we have there is that it's in one location. So we're part of the START teams that we have is the behavioral crisis unit that we have. So that actually covers statewide. So it's much more effective to have those team members out across the state rather than just one single location here. I will say that of the 55, there's only 6 that are filled, and we're going to work with those employees to transition to another position within the department.
Okay, that makes sense. And then looking at, I guess, DSPs in general, how many does the department have, and how has our ability to recruit and retain workers for these positions changed recently, particularly in light of some of the equity salary adjustments?
Let me speak very directly to that. The DSPs are the lifeblood of what we do, and that's why it's unbelievably critical for us to continue to partner with the legislature on making sure that we adequately fund those salaries for those individuals, because we can't do it. Very plainly speaking, we can't do it without our DSP. So not only are they there every day, they're working hard. They have an incredibly hard job, and the least we could do is continue to advocate for that. So we have seen some improvements on the ability to hire and retain. But one of the challenges, in fact, I think Chair Lady Hazelwood has mentioned this before, is we always play catch up instead of trying to get in front of it. And we're hoping to continue to work very closely with the legislature to make sure that we get in front of the salary adjustment needs, to make sure that providers in the state as a whole can continue to recruit quality individuals to serve the most vulnerable, especially as we're seeing the needs become even more and more prevalent and more folks are going to need those services. So I'll let Andy chat a little bit more about that. But I just want to drive that home to the committee about the value of the DSP wage increase and how it has created stability for providers, but also has prevented a lot of system collapse by allowing us and allowing providers to retain quality folks who become, very much partners in the life journey of an individual. So thank you for doing that. And I'll let Andy talk a little bit more about the impact.
Thanks, Commissioner. So there's 2 components. Obviously, we have the provider DSPs that we have, and that rate is now with this budget proposal at $14.44. We also have DSPs, which are HTT positions for the department. We have 110 vacancies right now, and the average wage is right around $15, and I think it's 30 cents or so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that information and for the good work your department does.
Thank you.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Turner and your team, thank you so much. We've been good friends since you came on board, and the folks to your in the audience have been good friends for a long time too. So thank you for the work that you do. We've talked a lot about positions, so I'm not going to go into the number of positions and the transition there, but I do want to go back to the Tennessee Strong Families. We're making a substantial investment in that. And tell me a little bit more about that. What exactly or how exactly are we defining respite care? Is this 1 night, 2 night, 3 nights? What are we looking for? And if we could talk about the geographic location of these homes as well.
Sure. So I'll give a very high level and let Jordan talk in more of the details. But part of the mission of our department is to reach those that are unseen. And the governor has been very forthcoming in the challenge to the cabinet, I think to anyone in state government, to say, are we getting to folks that feel like they're unheard and unseen? We started having conversations internally last summer about how do we continue to help children that are inside foster care, and how do we work closer with our partners at DCS to create the Tennessee Strong Families Network, respite care, understanding the need for these children to move out of state services into hopefully adoptive and loving homes, or even foster homes that families may make the decision to eventually adopt the child. So we created a lot of different conversations around, is respite care necessary? Is financial support necessary? What does that look like? So we landed on a lot of different options to try to give Tennessee families as many alternatives as they could to meet whatever needs of the individual and the child that they've moved into their home, but also the flexibility for the families. So respite was part of that. So I think there's going to be some varying levels to what that looks like, but I'll let Jordan talk a little bit deeper about what we're hoping to accomplish by creating the programs that we're developing.
Good morning, Leader Hawk. Good to see you again, sir. The respite, to answer your question about duration, our hope is to have the shortest amount of stay possible. So in the best of circumstances, the young person would transition into these homes from a hospital setting, as we've indicated, while we're lining up foster or working with DCS to line up long-term foster care for that youth. And the intent is for this to be a step-down program, allowing us to maintain their physical health, which many of these young people have pretty significant medical needs, but helping to allow the potential foster family to meet with them and interact with them in a little bit different setting, and then transition them to long-term care. So the intent is to be as short as is necessary to assure successful permanency when they get to their foster family.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you. And are we going to be utilizing these state-owned community homes all across the state? Are there available spaces in every community home, I'm guessing, or are we converting whole home settings to youth, which is what I'm assuming we're going to do?
That's correct. Yeah. And we want to make those available in any area of the state that we can, because part of the challenge for us, what we don't want to do is create something that does not benefit the citizens of Tennessee. And this will give us flexibility to be able to have different homes in different regions that will be available immediately to allow very highly medically acute children to have services as quickly as possible once we work through some of the challenges with DCS to make sure that those homes are going to be ready and available.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for being with us today.
Sure.
I have a question. The department received $180.6 million in federal stimulus funding through the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group to build 3 new regional offices, which will house seating and positioning clinics. Can you please provide us with an update on the project? And is it on budget, or does the department foresee inflationary issues? And then also just, let us know how these will function. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Representative Lynn. Great question. We're on track with getting everything together to build those 3 new regional facilities and seating and positioning clinics. Been working very closely with the Department of General Services and the Stream Division. We've now procured pre-construction and construction management firms, as well as designers. And so we are, with East and West, we are moving full steam ahead, closely behind it with the middle office. And so far, everything is on budget or in budget and on time.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good morning, Commissioner and
Good
team. Hey, listen, two questions, 2 parts. First, an update on the Katie Beckett waiver and how that program's going. And also, we talked briefly about Part B, that has been so successful, we may fill all the slots come next month or 2 before the end of the budget year. Can you give us an update on that, and what you need to get us through the rest of the year for those families that require Part B to help their children?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, for the question. So Katie Beckett program has been wildly successful. And when I say that, that's not hyperbole. We have had families reach out to us saying, this is going to save my marriage. This is going to save my ability to provide for my family. There are very real issues that Tennessee families deal with every day, that this program has created some capacity for them to actually live. So I want to thank you for your passion on it, the committee for being supportive of it. We need it. And it is a program that has been one of the programs that I'm most proud of in our department, that you can see the results for families. You can see children thriving. You can see moms and dads actually growing closer together to their children. So I'll let Jordan talk a little bit more about the nuances off the operational side, but we need to continue to make sure that we invest in the Katie Beckett program because it has created unbelievable returns for the state of Tennessee, but most importantly for families that are involved in the program.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the question, Representative Whitson. So as Commissioner indicated, and as we, I think, spoke to this committee a little bit about last year, the program was new for us. As that program rolled out, we, in real time, made sure that we were making the application process easier, make sure that people and families had the right information. The results of those things, along with as the commissioner indicated, an effective program, have certainly increased enrollment. And so to your point, and I think Deputy Commissioner Kidd can give us the exact numbers, but to your point, sir, in the last 6 months, we've seen a very steep rise in enrollment numbers and thankfully, and then also from a challenge perspective, that means we will exhaust availability, we believe, for the Part B portion of that program sometime probably earlier midsummer. I'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Kidd for your exact numbers.
Thanks, Jordan. Yes, there are 2,272 children currently enrolled and 427 pending enrollments, and the maximum number of slots is 2,700. So we're bumping right up against that cap at this point.
And briefly, let the members know what Part B, what it provides to families, if you could.
Sure. And again, at a very high level, Part B is, so there's two portions of the Katie Beckett program. Part A that we work very closely with our partners at TennCare, and Part B is a program that gives families the ability to spend $10,000 to utilize for therapies or respite or home modifications for their children, depending on what the family needs. And I think that's one of the things that's really unique about the Part B program is it builds in flexibility for families not to be so rigid, but to actually have opportunities to make decisions that would best suit their child. And we've had folks tell us that they've made shower modifications, ramp modifications, therapy challenges that they may have in their community. It gives them extra dollars to be able to utilize some of those therapy things. So Jordan can talk a little bit more about that, but there's a lot of flexibility built into Part B that has made it unbelievably successful, where we've actually seen families navigate to Part B because of the flexibility.
Yes, sir. I can't say it any better than that. The program, resoundingly, we thought families would probably want to utilize the healthcare reimbursement account, which essentially is a credit card that they can use to purchase modifications and services. That has been shown to be true in spades at this point, with almost 95% of all families choosing that option. And again, I think as families, you know, we're a big community, but we're a small network. And I think as those families have talked to other families of children and begun to kind of explain to them the ease of use, that people have gravitated toward the HRA and they've enrolled at record numbers.
Chairman Whitson.
Again, thank you, Chair Lady. Again, please keep us posted as we get toward that cap, and keep the Chair Lady and the committee updated at what we need to make sure we continue to support those families. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Commissioner. It's good to see you, and
too.
your
Thank you.
staff here. And I can't say thank you enough for what you guys do for the constituents that you serve. So thank you very much. I want to start with the with TEIS, or the Tennessee Early Intervention System. Last year, we were able to expand services. I think it was from ages 3 to actually it was from age 3 to age 4. We were able to establish, I think, some new positions, maybe somewhere around 100, if I do, if I remember that. Can you tell me how many children, additional children, have been served as a result of this expansion?
Sure. And I'll turn it over to Andy. He actually has those numbers, but I want to drive that point home, how beneficial that expansion has been, because it has given, again, parents flexibility in making decisions that they think is best for their child on how they pursue some of their therapeutic deliveries or their occupational therapies. But overall, there's their development as a child that the parent's going to know about. So that program has been very successful, and I'll let Andy kind of talk a little bit more about the details of the numbers.
Thanks, Commissioner. Chairman Hicks, we went live with the expansion to age 4 on October 15th. And since that time, we've seen 512 families choose to continue on with the program. So those children turned 3 and decided to continue on with TEIS. We actually, the first couple of months were lower numbers, but we're averaging 156 per month for the acceptance rate at this point. So we anticipate that we'll be able to serve about 1,900 children from their 3rd to 4th birthday.
Well, were there any roadblocks or barriers that you had to account for?
Roadblocks probably it's anytime you deal with the federal government automatically creates some of the challenges. So we had to work very closely with the federal government to make sure that they approve the process. So I'm not sure if I'd call that a roadblock, Chairman Hicks, but you just never know the timing when you have to deal with another a government entity at the federal level. But thankfully we've gotten it to where we're really moving forward at a very quick pace for families. And I think that was the most important thing for us is how do we make sure we get children enrolled in this program through that continuity. Again, we talked about it earlier and we've been able to do that. And as Andy just said, we're doing it at a very high level. It's been very successful and I anticipate it's going to continue to grow.
Great. And then I know that you guys requested to expand that to 5-year-olds. I don't think that was included from what I see in the governor's budget. So if that were to be expanded, would you all need additional support? What kind of support would you all need?
Yes, sir. I'll talk in very high levels about that and let Andy talk specifics. But one of the challenges there for us, and thank you for the question, is you would have families then that would have to make that decision about do they have to pay out of pocket now? Do they send their children to a school that may or may not have some of those programs? We're anticipating right around 2,000 families could lose services if that is not extended. Very similar to what you're seeing in age 3 and 4. We're anticipating that same level of growth into 4 and 5. That's probably the top feedback we received back from parents was, are you going to continue doing it for age 5? FNA has been a great partner of ours. They have been very understanding about the needs of our department. We're always grateful for the dollars that they do give us. Those dollars that they did allocate allowed us to extend it into age 4. I'll let Andy talk a little bit more about some of that impact about why I think age 5 is just as important.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'll just tell you what we had requested was 13.5 in total and 13.5 million in total funding and 8.8 in state funding for that.
And one of the piggybacks off that, Mr. Chairman, if I can add to that, is what a lot of folks don't realize is our number 2 referral network for early intervention actually is children inside DCS custody. So there will be an impact there for those children that are inside DCS custody that would fall in the eligibility bracket for TEIS too. So it's a pretty big impact.
And to kind of finish up this conversation, last year in the budget document, I think there was actually some language in there that said that TEIS participants would actually be given a choice to be able to switch over to Part B. How many of those families did transition over to Part B, of course, being with the Department of Education versus did? So what was that makeup of who actually?
Yeah, we can get that number for you if we need to, but there were some families that made that decision. But I think, again, that's the important part is that this allows the families to make that choice. With the extension, if the extension is not there, then the families no longer have that choice. They have to make a decision of not sending a child or trying to figure out how to pay for those therapies themselves if their community even has those options for them. But we'll get that information and be able to provide back to you in the committee shortly.
Thank you. And then kind of go off on another subject, talking about ECF choices as well as the MAPS program. The department received $25 million in recurring funding. And of course, that was to add 1,250 ECF choices that were on the wait list over to the MAPS program. Could you talk a little bit about what that looked like, how many enrollees has been moved over to MAPS, and how many people are still on that ECF choices wait list as well?
Thank you very much for the question. So the MAPS program, which launched in November of last year, we hired, set up the infrastructure, developed the application and programming process. I only mention that because it is a little bit important to note that we developed with a vendor an application-based software that uses GPS location to help teach young people how to travel. That took a little bit longer than expected. Today, we're at about 50 folks that are receiving services as we speak. We anticipate referrals somewhere between 50 and 75 per month between now and the end of the year, which would allow us to just about reach our year 1 enrollment target, which was somewhere between 350 and 400 people. So the waiting list to shift over to the ECF Choices program, that waiting list for the first time in the state's history was exhausted last year. And again, for those of us that have been very close to it and doing this work for some time, I don't think I thought I would ever see that day. Many of us didn't, and we did. That will probably continue to build again if we can't keep up with demand on an annual basis. So as it stands right now, for the last year, we've been contacting families saying, hey, you reached out to us and said you might want these services. Would you like them? Those that said yes were ushered into the program. And again, right now, whereas some of you probably remember it's been as high as 7,000 and 8,000 people before, today that's 0.
Chairman Hicks, if I can add something that I think is important, and it's kind of an open invite to everyone on this committee to join us. We are actually working on a statewide tour of school districts, school superintendents, leaders that are inside your communities, and I'm sure each one of you know, to actually go to those school districts and present the programs that are available for families that they may or may not be aware of if they have children with disabilities. But we're also working to impact general education classrooms. The last thing we want to do is for folks to think this is not an inclusive conversation. General education teachers have children with disabilities in their classroom that they need to be paying attention to. So we're actually doing statewide tour. We've been to 5 counties so far. I've got 2 more meetings today, and we're going to continue to travel in those areas. But the reason I bring that up is MAPS is a huge part of that conversation for students that are graduating that would be eligible for the MAPS program. We also have the Tennessee Believes program, which this committee and the legislature funded, that allows students with disabilities to go to college at a community college or a 4-year institution. Andy's working very closely with the TCATs now to make sure that they're eligible. What we don't want to do is if an individual wants to have a job and have a paycheck, we want to create every avenue and partnership with any group available, Chamber of Commerce, all of them, to make sure that our population can have an opportunity to go to work and actually earn a paycheck and create a living for themselves. And that eventually moves them away from some of the dependency that they may or may not need on state government, on federal government. We've actually seen more and more individuals just saying, hey, I want to live on my own and be independent. What can you do to help us? And that's kind of what the department is trying to do now, is make sure we get out of the way where we need to and allow people to thrive.
So how will the 6 intake coordinators, I know you guys are going to basically use equity, Department of Equity, to pay for those. What does that look like? How much equity are we talking when you say that?
That's a good question. That's 500,000.
Okay, 500,000.
Yep.
And then just to make sure, that I'm clear, what are the major differences between choices and MAPS? What are maybe some similarities and what are some differences?
Sure, it's a great question, and with so many programs, we're having these conversations on a pretty consistent basis. So the ECF Choices program is focused on a more traditional service package. So it's anything including and up to 24/7, 365 days a year in a home with roommates, and a full support package. And then also, obviously, focuses very keenly on teaching people, not just young people, anybody enrolled, the skills and the abilities that they might need to become competitively employed. The MAPS program focuses on young people between the ages of 15 and 22, tries to familiarize them with technology. And as you guys might imagine, what we found out is a 15-year-old living with a disability is more adept at utilizing his or her phone than I am. And they expect to learn those kind of skills. And then it provides a foundational understanding for them of what's around them in their community, lets them think about what they might want to do long-term to earn and be independent. And then with them and their family, teaches them the skills that they need, hopefully at the point at which they graduate, that we can, tip our cap to them and say, keep in touch, and they move along their path the way we all did.
Wonderful programs. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you all
Thank
again
you.
for
Yes,
what
sir.
you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I've got a couple of follow-ups bouncing back and forth on some things that Chairman Hicks brought up. We talked about the 3 to 5-year-olds and extending that. I'm assuming after age 6 that those will fall into the Department of Education. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct. The
So we
school
won't-
districts pick
It's
that
not
up.
something we're going to need to build on year by year. There is a stopping point.
That's correct. Yeah,
for
and it's
that.
a good question. So I had that question asked before. After age 5, you cannot extend early intervention. The public school systems pick up those responsibilities.
All right. And then on the Choices program, it's great to hear that we don't have a waiting list for the first time in memory. It's music to start the day. Um, I guess my question, because in talking with some providers, and it has been a few months ago, so maybe it's changed, but there could be a difference in being enrolled in the Choices program and actually having services, because some of the providers were having difficulty filling slots. So you could tell me that I'm enrolled in Choices, but nobody is going to show up at my door because the personnel's not there to fill it. So are they enrolled, or are they actually receiving services?
Yes, Chair Lady, excellent question. So very candidly, I'll tell you that the DSP workforce crisis, a lot of the same issues that we've talked about with this committee this morning, and we've talked about quite a bit over the last couple of years, are the reason for the delay in initiation of services. I'll tell you, it's hit especially hard in the clinical components of services, nurses and therapy providers. Not only here in the state of Tennessee, but as many of you well know, that's a nationwide problem. But the DSP workforce crisis also is contributing to that. And as this committee has generously in the past recommended and approved increases for DSP, for direct support professionals in our field, that's helped some. But to be candid, it has not stemmed the tide away from our business, and it's brought a few people back, but we have work left to do there.
So I'm assuming the answer to my question is not necessarily being enrolled in Choices does not guarantee that I'm currently receiving services.
Yes, ma'am. I apologize for not answering it directly. That's correct.
All right. And then one other question. We've talked about all these programs. I get confused about them, and I hear about them on a fairly regular basis. I can only imagine what the average parent or family member trying to navigate through all this. And some of the programs seem to, at least to the naked eye, have overlapping enrollees, overlapping services. How do you make sure that, what's the communication mechanism, I guess, for families? And how do we make sure that while people are maximizing all of the opportunities and programs that are there, that we're not doubling up when it's unnecessary?
I'll answer that first question for you. We've got a very robust communication effort to make sure that parents understand exactly what's available to them. So we've done multiple statewide tours. Social media is actually a major impact for our department, for our population, to make sure that families are staying aware of what's available to them. But your point's well taken. Our department is the king of acronyms. So basically every program we has some sort of acronym and initials to it.
Or a catchy title.
Or a
Tennessee
catchy, that's
Blues,
right. You're right. A catchy title as well. So the last thing we want to do is, it's already hard enough to be a parent. It's incredibly difficult to be a parent of a child with disabilities when you're tired, working two jobs, and you're just trying to figure out how in the world can I get some help. So we've worked to create really clear lanes of communication with simple documents, simple PowerPoint presentations, very targeted approaches to audiences that desperately need it, to make sure that they're aware of that, but then also making sure that we're expanding our efforts to get out in front of those parents. I've gone on my own statewide tours to meet with parents that are impacted by our programs, but also work to create a little bit more of a town hall setting as we're moving forward. So we're being very diligent. I've done a really good job of communicating that, but we want to get to people that don't know about us. I think that's been the real challenge for us, is continuing to navigate some of those challenges, because Tennessee's growing and there's more and more families that are going to become aware and actually need our services. So the communications department is always working on how do we evolve to continue to be more efficient in presenting what's available to Tennessee families. So I'll let Jordan answer that second part of your question about the overlap.
Yes, ma'am. So very quickly, we're working and have for some time directly with the Tennessee Council on Developmental Disabilities. They operate a site called the Disability Pathfinder. That in and of itself was developed to try to combat just what you're talking about. It's a place where resources gather, families can go and visit the website and hopefully get pointed into the right direction. I will say that we're also participating in the next iteration of the No Wrong Door Committee, that was started years ago with the intent to focus on just what you're talking about. Certainly, even as the people that work all day, every day within these programs, it is understandable that someone without that level of exposure would be confused by it. And so we're trying to address it as aggressively as possible.
Thank you. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate y'all being here this morning. Chairman Hicks mentioned earlier the new positions that were created in last year's budget, 99, I believe. Can you tell us how many of those have been filled to date, and have you had any problems, I guess, filling those positions in general?
Go ahead, Amy. Thanks, Commissioner. Yes, sir. We have 97 current vacancies for the social counselors in the TEIS program. We have an average caseload of about 70 at this point. We've seen an effort over the last several months that we've been able to fill more and more of those positions. So we're actually hiring more than are leaving. So our retention rate is getting better and better. That's inclusive of the market adjustment that we've seen recently, as well as hiring efforts and training. So
If I can add a little bit to that too, to Andy's point, there was also very targeted outreach for the TEIS program and recruitment of employees. That has been unbelievably successful in our area here in Middle Tennessee. But also the equity adjustment, I think that Andy referenced, was unbelievably impactful. Same as you hear about from the DSP side about the need to make sure that we maintain the right level of wage increase. Same thing as can be said on the TEIS side and the Katie Beckett side, that we need to continue to make sure that we're honoring the efforts of those employees, and the equity increases have gone a long ways in making sure, to Andy's point, that we actually hire more people than we actually see leave, and slowly starting to turn that corner to make sure that we're going to have some stability for families.
Shirley, just a couple of follow-ups, if that's
Certainly,
okay.
Go ahead.
So still touching on last year's budget, another pool of funding that we provided was $3 million to increase provider rates under that TEIS program we've been discussing. So this year's proposed budget, it has $82,500 in recurring state funding to establish a full-time position to support quality assurance in that TEIS providers. So can you tell me how many TEIS providers there are currently, and have there been issues with quality? Tell us maybe why that position is needed.
Sure. Absolutely. It's a great question. So as we've expanded the program and we've seen natural year-over-year growth, that puts more reliance on the providers that are actually providing those services. And so last year you saw an addition to the provider rate itself, which has helped a lot. And then the expansion to age 4 also helped as an economies of scale. So they were able to see more kids. But then that also put the challenge of making sure that they had the staff available. And so that's what the provider rate was for. This position specifically is to ensuring that as we are growing, is that those providers are providing quality services to the kids. And so that's what this position does, is it looks at how those services are being provided and making sure that's of the highest quality.
Thank you. And then just one last follow-up on that program. So currently we've got about a $2.5 million reserve for TEIS. So can you tell us how that is being utilized, how that reserve is being utilized?
As we've seen a year-over-year growth, we have that carry forward ability so that we can make sure that if we were to see a large bump in referrals and then eligibility of children, that would cover that amount. So historically, we've seen about a 7% growth. Right after COVID, we saw about a 12% growth one year. So that's a significant difference in year-over-year growth. And so that carry forward and that reserve amount gives us that buffer that if we were to see an increase in referrals, we'd be able to cover that.
Thank you.
And what percentage increase would that allow you to cover?
Might have to get back with you on that. I believe it would probably be about a 4%, thinking roughly, be about a 4% in growth. If we saw 4% additional in referrals, that would cover us for that.
So 4% over the normally what you budget.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. I'm always excited to hear about your program and what you do. I am curious, and I was listening. I thought maybe I'd get an answer to that. You talked about the 3 positions, the 2 in the east and middle and east, and you're adding 1 in West Tennessee. Why are we just adding this position in West? Why have we not had this position all along?
That's a great question. There's been a recent restructure of how we've been operating the seating and positioning clinic. And so short answer is, historically, we had someone in middle managing both. We've seen a lack of management. And so there's been a recent restructure there. Very important that we have that additional position. Can't answer why we didn't have it in the past, other than we should have.
Representative Shaw.
Did that impede your services in West Tennessee by not having that position?
As we've seen some growth, short answer is yes. They were fairly stagnant for a while, which I think is part of the problem that brought it to Commissioner Nye's attention about making sure that we should be growing that program and not just staying where we are. And so and from a statewide standpoint, we've kind of stayed where we have been. We'd like to grow that program and serve more and more people, both with IDD as well as other folks in the community that have some type of seating and positioning needs.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your staff. Just I want to give a shout out to Journeys in Community Living. You know, I remember when I first got elected, and I think it's important for members to go visit some of these support networks. Watch the guy that was deaf and blind working 2 jobs. That, I mean, I was just amazed. But wanted to put the commissioner, deputy commissioner on the spot if I could. Andy Kidd, you shared a really nice story with me about 2 weeks ago about adoption. Can you mind sharing that for the committee?
Absolutely, Representative Sparks. I appreciate it. Yes, I did share with you that I'm a foster parent. I've got an 11, 12, and 13-year-old at the home. They've been with my wife and I for over a year, and it means a lot to me to have those kiddos in my home. And as we've worked with Commissioner and DCS and partnering with DCS on making sure that foster kids have a place to live, it's been very important to me, both professionally and personally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Representative Parkinson, we're so happy that you could join us, and I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always good to see you. Appreciate you allowing me to be here. I do have a question regarding your Choices program. With the Choices program, and correct me if I'm wrong, an individual that has a family member inside the house that they're caring for, the individual that lives in the house cannot be paid for caring for that person. I'm sorry, how did I word that? Was I wording it right? Qualified to care for that person if they live inside that house. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's a little bit to that, but I'll let Jordan answer that. Go ahead, Jordan.
That is correct. In the ECF Choices program, there's a prohibition on a paternal or maternal member of the family who lives in the same home getting paid to provide supports.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But if the individual lived in the house 2 blocks away, they could be paid to come and care for the family member.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And what's the reason for that?
Well, there's a couple of different reasons. And so the first of which is from a national best practice standpoint, and I'll just have to be candid with this committee. This is a difficult area to talk about because there are some heightened emotions around it, but there is data that supports that when people are paid or have a paid caregiver related to them in the home, that they tend to not move along that pathway toward adulthood, not move out of the home. They don't seem to progress on an independent basis at the same pace or in the same trajectory that someone who's not supported directly by a live-in family member. So the insinuation could be that as a source of income for the family, that maybe their long-term best interests aren't always operationalized. So now let me tell you from my personal experience in 30 years of doing direct care work and being in this business, that is not true across the board. There are many, many people that receive paid care in their home or have in the past by a family member who have gone on and flourished, have progressed along the pathway that we would expect. So this is a case, I think, where policy has been adopted to protect those who may have been at jeopardy. And unfortunately, the way that that's applied broadly is the only way it can be. It's an all or none thing. Either you can be paid and live in the home or you can't. And so those family members that may have been paid in the past or would be paid in the future that would be acting in the best interest of that young person and would help shepherd them into adulthood, unfortunately don't have that opportunity in order to save those that may be taken advantage of.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have difficulty with that whole policy idea. To make a person make a choice between a loved one and leaving the space where their loved one is, somebody that they truly care about, we're not just talking about children either, because we can be talking about seniors too, right? Am I
Yes, sir.
correct?
Right.
Right. And so if you have a parent that lives with their adult child, but the adult child is taking care of the parent, and because we will not allow that adult child to be compensated, but we'll allow someone else who doesn't necessarily live with the parent to come into their home and take care of the child, that's just backwards to me. And I don't know if there's something that we can look at, to shift away from that. It's just backwards to me. I would like to see us fix that. But thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go back. We have just a moment. I'm going to steal some of the treasurer's time, if you'll pardon me. One of my favorite subjects, DSPs. We talked about, I think, Commissioner, your words were along the lines of they're the backbone of what we do. It's my understanding we have some DSPs who are paid directly by the state. We have, I think, the majority of DSPs who are paid through a provider. And I don't think that those pay scales are the same. So can you help me understand that? Tell me how much more the state folks are paid and how we can, I guess, justify that difference when they're all doing what I think is the same work.
Sure.
Yes, Chair Lady, the current average salary for the provider DSPs is $14.44 with this budget proposal. The HTTs, which are DIDD DSPs, is roughly $15.30 per hour.
And when we put additional dollars into the DSP budget, do those dollars get spread across both categories?
They do not. They're two separate,
Budget.
two separate codes. One would
Okay.
be for the department to pay its employees, and the other is for our contracts that we pay the providers.
I just think something for us to keep in mind as we look at this committee has been pretty forceful in past years about continuing to work on those DIDD salaries. And I think we need to just remain focused. Not that $15.30 is enough, but we can't pay them enough. But what we can do is hopefully get them to something that is more reasonable just in terms of today's salaries. So with that, I don't have any other people on my list. Commissioner, I want to thank you and your team.
Thank you.
We say this to all our departments, and it's true, but you all are critical to the work of the state. But your role for Tennessee's truly most vulnerable is just something that I think every Tennessean needs to understand and be proud of, because we're all about in Tennessee, we're about being accountable, taking care of ourselves and responsibility for ourselves, but we're also about making sure that we take care of those who cannot take care of themselves, and you all help us do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here this morning. Oh, Representative McKenzie, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know I'm out of order here, but I'd just like to take a moment. I saw a good friend of mine, recently retired person that's been in this lane and just really caring for the mental health of a lot of East Tennesseans. Former President and CEO of Helen Ross McNabb, Senator Jerry Wagner. So let's give him a round of applause.
Well, you stole my thunder, but thank you for doing that. Representative Parkinson.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I had a question for these guys before they left, but I'll catch them outside.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Treasurer, I believe you're next on our list. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. And you were here bright and early and sat through a whole previous presentation, so thank you for your dedication to being here. And please, we'll look forward to, we always like to hear from the money man, so just tell us how things are going with the money of the state.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm David Lillard, Tennessee State Treasurer, and with me today is Rick DeBray, Certified Public Accountant, who's the Deputy Treasurer of the Department, and Michael Brakebill, the far right, who is the Chief Investment Officer of the Treasury Department, and we're pleased to be with you today. I wanted to be sure and point out at the outset here what we have up on the screen here, which is a Treasury at a Glance document that was on your electronic dashboard. It's a front and back document that gives some little short snippet summary of some of the major programs of the department, not all of them and everything, but today I just want to point out one of them that's particularly enlightening. That is unclaimed property. It's on the back side of this sheet that shows that the department currently holds $1.28 billion of unclaimed property for Tennesseans throughout the state. That's $1.28 billion. Last year, in fiscal year 22, we paid 50,337 claims for a total of $57.6 million returned to Tennesseans during that time period. And all of that is it's in every legislative district throughout the state. So our programs, it just illustrates with that particular program how we impact Tennesseans in a positive way. And we help increase their per capita income and net worth by doing the things that we do. And we commend you to that sheet for an overview of that. That's taken from the Treasurer's annual report for the year ended June 30, 2022. I want to also point out that the economic impact of Treasury services and programs broken down by each of Tennessee's 95 counties yield a great deal of positive influence on our state. Altogether, Treasury's economic impact to the state was over $11.26 billion for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. In regard to our budget request for the year 2023-2024, the request is $70.078 million, and it consists of $63.233 million funded from revenues generated by the department and $6.844 million funded from state appropriations. Additionally, we've asked for an allocation of $22.111 million of federal American Rescue Plan Act funds. We'll talk about that in just a second. As you know, Tennessee Department of Treasury's operating cost is funded primarily from fees generated through earnings on investments managed by the department and from a component of the contributions made by employers, participants, and agencies in the various programs administered by the department. The American Rescue Plan Act funds are being applied to various technology initiatives within the department, including a significant project we refer to as Project ARES to replace the current Concord Retirement Administrative System, IT system, which is reaching the point of obsolescence. We have provided information in our responses to the committee's questions regarding cost increases. These are listed on page 20 of the document we provided to the committee, and we also listed on pages B17 and B18 of the budget document. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these in any further manner, but I do want to highlight a few specific areas. One is investment consulting services, the cost increase we requested for the 401k and 403b plans at $200,000 recurring. Treasury is seeking this cost increase to cover the investment consulting services and increase in that cost for the 401k and 457 plans and the optional retirement program and 403b plans for higher education employees. It is noteworthy that these plans had combined balances of over $10.1 billion as of June 30, 2022. In addition to state and higher education employees, there are 360 local governments participating in the plans, as well as 61,473 public school teachers in Tennessee. These consulting services are in line with the aggressive stance Treasury takes regarding our fiduciary duty to ensure that investment funds perform in accordance with recognized benchmarks and that they have appropriate expense ratios, and if not, they are placed on a negative watch and ultimately mapped out of the system. This review occurs quarterly and explains why we need these funds to further enhance that system and continue it. It is a key component for our professionals overseeing this program. Another area is information systems and technology positions. We asked for a cost increase of $435,000 recurring. Treasury is requesting 3 full-time positions for information systems, i.e. an information security analyst, a production control lead, and platform services server administrator. These positions will provide process improvements by increasing the available bandwidth to perform security-related tasks and enhance general planning. I want to point out that IT is a critical, highly critical function in the Treasury Department, and it has yielded great returns for Tennesseans that we serve, for the departments that we work for throughout state government, and over 500 local governments that we serve throughout the state. For instance, in this last fiscal year, we implemented an automated retirement application process system, which was an IT product with other divisions of the Treasury Department, where we cut the time it takes to process a retirement application and get on the retired payroll from what was previously several months to the current amount of about 24 days it takes to do that. That shows you what automated processes can do in state government generally. That is a victory for our information technology personnel, all of whom we applaud and appreciate for their efforts. That is one reason why we believe Treasury in every state department should have a 21st century public company level IT function that results in much greater efficiency to state government and to the Tennesseans that we serve. Another item is salary market funding. We wanted to call to your attention that we asked for $4.338 million recurring, consisting of $4.212 million of departmental funds and $126,000 of state funds for market adjustments. Treasury engaged Ernst & Young, similar to what the executive branch and other departments of state government have done, to conduct a review of job descriptions, market surveys, salaries, and a compensation gap analysis. EY provided their final report, and our request to the administration reflected an estimated cost to bring the positions that were able to be benchmarked to a competitive level for the salary grade recommended. Additional cost was estimated for those positions that could not be benchmarked, as well as for compression adjustments. I want to note and call your attention to the fact that the governor's proposed budget does not include the full amount of the requested salary market adjustments for the Treasury Department. We respectfully request that the additional requested amount of $1.162 million be included in the final budget to ensure that sufficient salary funding is also available to provide for compression adjustments. This additional amount can be funded 100% from Treasury Department revenues and not from the general fund of the state. As I'll just add for a moment here that many of you know that Tennessee, generally Tennessee state government, but particularly in departments like ours that have a high number of professionals in it that are certified public accountants and other professional designations, we're facing a crisis with the fact that our salaries are below those of the private sector. And for the first time in my 14 years as treasurer, we are competing directly head on head with the private sector for that talent. We're competing with the big four accounting firms and other people. And, you know, when you can go to those firms and make at least a third more, sometimes double more than what you make in state government, it gets really, really hard to keep the people that are necessary to keep the wheels turning and the cogs working. I'll also point out that in other areas, investment securities, proxy voting operations, we requested $1.1 million departmental revenue recurring. Treasury requested a cost increase for investment securities proxy voting positions that was not funded. This request was for four full-time positions. The department intends to centralize and enhance the investment securities proxy voting process for the over 50,000 annual shareholder proposals received in the domestic and international securities portfolios managed by Treasury. This responsibility under this proposal will be transferred from the various internal and external portfolio managers in our investment division to a newly specialized unit of professionals within the legal and compliance division of the department, with the objective of achieving a more structured, controlled, and consistent focus over the proxy voting process across all of our portfolios. All securities voting will be subject to the final approval of the treasurer pursuant to legislation which has been introduced in this General Assembly as House Bill 1286 and Senate Bill 955 as a component of that legislation. It's by Leader Johnson in the Senate and by Chairman Zachary in the House. This cost increase will be funded from investment earnings in the various applicable securities portfolios managed by the department. The Treasury Department respectfully requests that this request be included in the final budget, which is adopted by the General Assembly. Finally, I want to point out that we very much appreciate the proposals to add to the TCRS funding this year with non-recurring dollars. This has been important in previous years in terms of reducing the further cost of the state over coming years of the recurring costs that normally occur when increases occur to the actuarially determined contribution over a specified amortization period. For instance, the two previous lump sum contributions that the General Assembly has given to TCRS, the $250 million in fiscal year 2021, produced recurring savings of $22.4 million for the amortization period through the year 2042. And the $350 million in fiscal year 2022 produced recurring savings of $31.2 million for the amortization period through the year 2043. And these have resulted in a positive effect on funded status of the retirement system. Madam Chair and members of the committee, that concludes my remarks. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. We do appreciate, and I must say, I go to conferences and places where Tennessee is comparing, where we compare ourselves to other states. And as we all know, we're very fiscally sound. And one of the key parts of that is the retirement system, which is the state's largest liability when you really get down to it. So I want to thank you for, on behalf of all Tennessee state employees and taxpayers who would bear the burden if there were a problem in that area. And thank you for your leadership and making sure that we continue to invest those funds wisely, and that every state of Tennessee employee can rest assured that when they retire, the money that they are making their plans on as to how they're going to live post-retirement will actually be there for them. So we thank you for your good work. And when you look at the numbers and the investment that you all have, the return that you all have managed to garner for that system, I think a lot of us would like to bring you all of our money and say, please manage that in just a like manner. But we do very much appreciate that. And the citizens of Tennessee, and particularly state employees, owe you a big thank you. So,
well, thank you, Madam
thank you
Chair.
for
I just
all
want
of
to say
us.
the leadership of the General Assembly is key to that. And of course, the hard work of the Treasury Department employees.
We certainly know how much we all have staff that keep us in line. So we understand that you have a big team behind you. So that thanks certainly is for all of those folks who are involved in that process. First on my list for you, Mr. Treasurer, is Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And again, welcome,
Thank you,
Mr. Treasurer and team. And I just want to echo the Chair Lady's comments. As a member of the Pension Council, I've really come to appreciate what you and your team of professionals do to ensure the financial strength and safeguarding our financial status for the state of Tennessee. It's been a real learning experience for me. You kind of stole my question when you were talking about the non-recurring dollars allocated to the TCRS and also the OPEB trust fund, and to eliminate unfunded liabilities. After the allocation of this funding, what is the status of the unfunded liabilities for these two programs, sir?
Well, the unfunded, we continue to have, in terms of overall funding of the pension systems, our state plan is a little bit less than 100% funded. The teacher plan and other plans, the local government plans, are more than 100% funded currently. And we continue to, of course, in this current investment market, last year we had a loss in the pension fund of around 3.4% or so. So, from that standpoint, it's a challenging investment market right now. So these funds that the General Assembly will put in will help us to maintain that really good funded status that we have. In the OPEB fund, they continue to earn earnings, the funds that are in there. And depending on how much the General Assembly puts in this year, it will result in a significant reduction in the overall OPEB liability of the state. I don't have the exact numbers here with me today, Chairman, but we'll be happy to furnish those to you.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Please, my question.
Chairman Williams, I think you had a follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer. You and I, thank you for coming today, and you and your team's great work, especially Ambassador West. But I did want to follow up on the Chairman Whitson's question. You know, it was kind of unheard of, really. I mean, our financial stability has gotten so great over the last several years that we find ourselves in an odd predicament where we're actually able to put non-recurring dollars into OPEB or pension programs. I guess the question is, it's becoming a little, and I'm glad we can do that. I mean, we want to shore up those. And 3.4% loss last year. What is that dollars as it relates to pension fund?
Michael Bragbill, you want to talk about that, the amount it results in?
Thank you, Treasurer. I don't have that number right now. I can come up
Well-
with an estimate.
Well, I get that. The reason why I was saying that is because, you know, we're putting $250 million in OPEB, $300 million in TCRS. I guess the question is this something we're going to have to do year over year because of the loss of revenues, or is this something that's just keeping us in the 99th percentile as it relates to what's going on? I guess the reason I asked that question is because we may not be in a financial, this committee has talked about for the last 5 years, even prior to this committee have talked about how this cannot continue. And one of these days they're going to be made right. And so I guess the question is at what point in time do we stop doing this? We funded broadband 5 years ago at $100 million, and we just thought we were, you know, going to do it in 2 years. Now we're almost $1.4 billion in broadband funding, and we're not even close. I guess in order to manage expectations going forward, because that's what we do this year and out years, are we going to have to put $550 million a year into these two programs in order to keep this status that we have nationwide?
Well, thank you, Chairman, for that good question and good observation. I'll just note parenthetically that even in the current fiscal year, we're ahead of budget in terms of collections, and we monitor collections of the state on a daily basis, and we're billions of dollars over it right now. So, you know, from that standpoint, there will be further recurring dollars even in the next budget beyond this, non-recurring dollars in the budget beyond this one. Your point is well taken, though, and that is, while we appreciate the amount that the General Assembly puts in, you might note that, you know, in the previous year, even though in 22 we had a loss in the pension fund, in 21 we had 26% return. That particular year, 26%, you know, and in previous years we had going back
That's the
at least
return
7
I
or 8
want you to
years.
get me on my money going
Right,
forward.
right. So, you know, the what we call the nominal return, that is the return that you have each year on your investment portfolio, or we do on the state's portfolio, it never stays the same, and it goes up and down. You know, an economist like Dr. Baum will tell you, you know, that's going to be a zigzag puzzle is what it's going to be. It's really the question of the trailing earnings over the last 10 to 15 years is what becomes very important. We have a positive number over that time period and hope to maintain that. Hopefully the United States will get its house in better order, and other things will happen that will positively influence the markets where we'll be back to earning money again. But in the meantime, just to lastly address your direct question, I just think it's a good management tool for the managers of state government, i.e. the members of the General Assembly, to put money that is beyond, you know, the normal planned dollars into the pension fund when the opportunity presents itself, as it does now in the governor's recommended budget and has for the last 2 years. Because again, as Chairman Hazelwood said, it is the largest liability the state has, this pension fund. If you look out over the years, even the legacy plan, which was closed as of July 1, 2014, to new entrants, that will be a large impact on the state budget until at least the year 2045. And so, you know, you're talking about a long way out in the future. And so in that regard, we can't predict what's coming in the future. So it's better today that we put aside a little additional seed corn when we have it in case there's a problem down the road.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Treasurer. I agree with you. It's always good to put a little seed corn in. The question is how many silos do we need? And in this instance, I'm a little bit, it's one of those things where it just doesn't seem like, we had this discussion about rainy day fund. What should our rainy day fund actually be? And depends on which PhD economist that's sitting here or across from us tells us what that number should be. I think it would be good to look at a formulary that would say, if everything continues to go good, this should be the minimum that we put in every year. Because I think it just seemed, I don't know that $550 million is a number we need to do every year. But thank you for answering my question.
Well, I would agree with your comment. Just say in closing that the state's pension liability is a known liability. It's actuarially determined, but it's a known liability. And so it's an opportunity to take money and place it against a known liability that you have. Other uses that you might put it to may or may not be known and current liabilities of the state as such. You may determine their higher priorities, but on the other hand, I don't think you can ever go wrong by helping to fund that known liability.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Treasurer. It's not going to surprise you what topic I'd like to discuss today. The state currently provides a 401k match dollar for dollar for an employee's first $50 contribution. The 2022-2023 budget included non-recurring funding to double that match from $50 to $100 for the first $50 contributed by the employee for 1 year. This year's proposed budget it proposes the same non-recurring enhanced match under the 401k program. So here's my question, as we've discussed before privately. How many employees who participate in the 401k program currently contribute only $50, and how many contribute 100 or more? And then as a follow-up to that, would it be more beneficial for an employee's retirement if this enhanced match it goes into effect, instead was matched up to $100 for the employee's first $100? So from just a mathematical equation out, as we're looking at this, is it better for the employee to match 100 to 100 with the state, or to remain at this 50 to 100?
Well, I'll just comment, then I'll let Ashley Neighbors, Assistant Treasurer here, who oversees that area, talk about the number of people that are involved in the program. But several years ago, when the state first began matching the 401k, our participation rate was something like 20% of state employees. Now we're up to around 90% of state employees participate as a result of that initial match. And Tennessee, we have a lot of great financial accolades in this state. We have AAA bond rating, all the things that have been mentioned here today, a highly funded pension system. But one thing we don't have is good retirement security for many of our citizens. And this is a way for the state, this proposal that you talked about, Leader, is a way by enhancing the match further that would further give citizens an opportunity, our governmental employees, who are our brothers and sisters in terms of serving state government, state of Tennessee residents, whether they're teachers or higher ed people or state government people, whatever they may be, gives them an opportunity to make sure that they can lead that dignified, sufficient, proper retirement that they should have and contribute to our economy in Tennessee. And also we're doing so in one of the best 401k and 457, 403b plans in the nation. As I mentioned during my remarks, our fiduciary oversight of those, where we meet quarterly with our CFAs and have an outside authority meeting with us, we review those plans. They've been the model that has been viewed by other states as being the leading in the country about how to maintain the best efficient system. You want to talk about the number of people involved in the system, Ashley?
Hi, Ashley Neighbors, Assistant Treasurer for Financial Empowerment. I was looking through my email, hoping that I had that information readily available for you. I wasn't able to locate it just yet, but we can get that information back to you. As the Treasurer mentioned, we do have a very high participation rate with the matching dollars that we provide to the state's 401k plan. You'll also know that the majority of our active participants now are in our hybrid plan, which does require participation in auto enrollment into that 401k vehicle. So many of the participants in that hybrid plan automatically qualify for some state matching dollars based on that participation.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you for that. If you can just get those numbers to the chairman, I'm sure she'll, share those with us. But to the second question, last year we matched, for every $50 an employee put in, we matched 100. And so in essence, they're getting 150 each pay period that is being invested on their behalf in the 401k. If we move that up to where if the employee puts in 100 and we put in 100, what does that look like when you run it out, over the next 20 or 30 years until they retire? The difference in those two ideas.
It will look like a lot of money is what it'll look like, Mr. Chairman, because and in a positive way, because it will encourage employees that might not have ordinarily thought about upping their match to do so. And that will be the causal factor. We know from what Ashley and her team and other people do that it's a matter of triggering a positive action by someone in retirement, whether you're talking about your own 401k account or whatever it may be. And over a 30-year career, that amount of money compounds and it becomes a large amount of money. We'll run you a projection on that. And we'll get it to every member of the committee so you can look at it. But you will see that it will result in a much better retirement over time.
Thank you, Ms. Treasurer, and thank you for the work that you and your team do. And if you could run those projections both
will.
ways, that would be fantastic.
We'll
If
do
we
that.
just match the 50 and 100, and if we match the 100 100, that would be
Sure.
awesome. Thank you.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2021, we authorized you to establish a capture insurance company. And then in 22-23, we put some money in non-recurring funding to move the cybersecurity part under the state's captive insurance program. Can you give an update on that migration on the cyber liability from that Brit Global outfit to the state's captive insurance program?
Committee members, this is Steve Summerall, Assistant Treasurer for Program Services, that has this area under him. Steve.
Good morning. Yes, sir, Representative. The funding that was provided initially was about $17 million for our property program to move property into the captive insurance company. The second piece of that, like you say, was the following year. There was another $6.8 million that came for cyber liability. And specific to your question about cyber liability, Brit Global was our carrier, our commercial carrier prior to the captive. But one of the things that we learned in the process once we established our captive for property was that the cyber liability market was diminishing. It was going away where we couldn't get any insurance. So that's why it made sense for us to move into the captive model, which we have about $10 million of coverage, but it's fully in the captive now.
Thank you.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Treasurer, for so much that you do, particularly around the issue of unclaimed property and helping our members get that back to our constituents. I do have a question about the small and minority business assistance loan. I noticed that the amount has gone down over the years and maybe come back up. Is that program functioning well? And if it's not, how can we assist you with helping that function better?
Thank you for that question, Representative. The program is basically in a wind down, and as I've informed the General Assembly before, that program was started before I became treasurer, and we continued it for a good while after I became treasurer. But we ended up having a lot of write-offs in that due to bankruptcies or business failures or other things like that occurred. And it was not very effective, I think, in terms of what it was originally intended to do. That's not to say there were not victories along the way. There were several businesses that were helped by that program. But when you look at the overall number, it was difficult in that regard. So we're currently collecting loans that are outstanding in that program and processing those, but we're not making new loans in that program. And it continues in that regard.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I don't see no other questions. Nobody's hand is up. So we appreciate you being here today. But again, I want to thank you for the great work that you and your department does on behalf of Tennessee taxpayers. And it really makes a difference. I mentioned before, it's worth saying again, we are the fiscal envy of 49 other states. And one of the main factors in that is the health of our pension plan, along with a lot of other things. But you all do yeoman's work to keep us on the right track, and we do appreciate it. Thank you for being here today. Chairman Hawk, do you have a personal order, I believe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not too often that we get to recognize folks from Greenville, Greene County here. It's 4 hours away, but we've had a couple of young people come from Greene County. We have Miss Kendall Kate, who was in school with my daughter. Kendall, if you could wave, and her now fiance, I believe, Jerry Goforth, works for the police department in Greenville, here with our aunt, Elisa Leopold, who works on mental health issues across the state. If we can please make them welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for traveling and being here bright and early on a Monday, all the way from Greene County. I thought Chairman Hawk was the only one who could do that. Yeah. I'm going to ask Commissioner Williams if she and her team would come forward, please. I know the Army had you detained, and we apologize on behalf of the Commissioner. It's been it is Monday, and we've been here for a little while, so we're really glad to have you sort of as the midpoint of our discussions, because you're always so enthusiastic and energetic. That should give us some steam to get through the rest of our hearings today. But please, if you would, just introduce yourself and those with you, and then we will look forward to hearing what's happening in the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Lady Hazelwood, Vice Chair Baum, and very distinguished members of this committee. We are so grateful and honored and blessed to be here today with each of you. At the table with me to my far right is Matt Yancey. He's our Deputy Commissioner of Community Behavioral Health Services. Right next to me is Director of Budget. That is Jean Wood. To my left, Heather Gunderson, Deputy Commissioner of Admin Services. And then to her left is Ty Thornton, and he serves as our Chief of Hospital Operations and Chief of Staff. I want to tell you that in the audience and watching online are representatives from our amazing community provider network across this state, as well as staff members and leadership of our hospitals that work day in and day out tirelessly to serve Tennesseans that are in need of hospitalization. We could not be here today without the dedication of them, our consumer groups, our faith-based groups, as well as our provider, as I said earlier, community and family groups. In the first 4 years of the Lee administration, you all have strongly supported the private-public partnerships that our team has leveraged, ensuring that our taxpayer dollars are served and utilized in the highest and most effective manner. It is with that track record that we look forward to the next year's budget request with you, as we know that every dollar will lead us forward in a next step to better serve Tennesseans that struggle day in and day out with mental health and substance use issues. I'd like to first start with our slides, starting with our mission and our vision. You'll see that our mission is collaborative pathways to resiliency, recovery, and independence for Tennesseans living with mental illness and substance use disorders. And our vision is a state of resiliency and recovery and independence in which Tennesseans living with mental illness and substance use disorders thrive. As a department, we value customer-focused responses, integrity, inspired purpose, excellence in all that we do, compassionate and effective leadership. We strive to be solutions and outcomes oriented, and then partnership, going beyond teamwork. If you look at where we stand today, the continued efforts to close the gap of those in need, you'll see in your slide presentation that almost 386,000 Tennesseans struggle with severe and persistent mental illness in our state. Of that number, our department focuses on those that are uninsured. That's right at 35,460 that are served through the provider communities across the state. If you look at the next slide, you'll see the 2019 data, which is the best we've got for those struggling with substance use issues, is right at 458,000. And our department, in partnership with providers, have served almost 20,000 Tennesseans in that area. Going to the next slide, you'll see kids and what we're struggling with kids. In 2021, we saw 95,000 youth that reported or had some sort of serious emotional disturbance. Of those, 5,350 are uninsured. The dollars that you have given us for the safety net for the uninsured served almost 1,500. Then you look at children and youth struggling with substance use disorder. Again, you'll see 1,260 that are uninsured. Of those, we continue to provide substance use programs to serve that population, serving upwards of 200 in that number. It's with that background that we want to share with you two stories. These stories simplify and actually explain, bottom line up front, the dollars and what you guys do to make them real. In Knox County and Knoxville, a little over 6 months ago, we were at a city county commission meeting. And at that meeting, they wanted to talk about what the state had done to respond to the needs in that county. In the back of the room sat a man who was obviously, you could tell he was sort of struggling. He started talking to us right around 8:30 p.m. And as we talked to him, found out that he was homeless. He was homeless and he was in a camp almost 10 miles outside of Knoxville. He walked to this meeting because he heard about it on his radio. He had formerly worked here in Nashville. He was a very successful boat mechanic. And there he sat in the back, homeless, and he was apologizing for the fact that he hadn't had a bath, nor had he eaten that day. On the spot, Helen Ross McNabb, and I believe one of their representatives is here today, Jerry Wagner, who's CEO of Helen Ross McNabb. On the spot, they came back, he and his team, they assessed the man with the dollars that you have approved. They got him into the crisis stabilization unit. His first request was to take a bath. And from there, he got fed. And from there, with the safety net, because he was uninsured, he was able to get the mental health services he needed so that he could come back into our community and work, which is all he wanted. He just had really struggled with mental health issues. That's one story. Second story, received a call from here in Nashville from a friend of mine who's a pastor, and he had a woman who was in his church, and this woman had a daughter who was struggling mightily with anxiety and depression, brought upon by being bullied and made fun of because she didn't have the things other kids had. When he called me, he said, "I know there's nothing you can do because this family's uninsured." And I said, "No, you're wrong. There's a lot we can do." The governor and the legislature have given us funding, number one, to have a school-based behavioral health liaison that's in that county. I will get that person there today. I called the CEO of Centerstone about that. Number two, the other thing you guys did is, again, the uninsured program for the safety net. Not only will she get assessed by a liaison, her services will be paid for through the safety net. And from that story, not only did that young girl get help, but the mother, who also was struggling with an addiction, got help. These two stories have a theme that run through them that are so important in this society today. And y'all know that because you talk to your pastors, you talk to your teachers, you talk to your business owners, you talk to your family, and you know that access and hope are the two most important factors in getting help to people that are struggling. You also know that if they don't get that help, the outcome's not real good. So it's like a win-win when we invest dollars upstream to intervene in that area. You guys have helped us serve over 408,000 Tennesseans that struggled with severe mental illness across the state and those that struggled with substance use. What I'd like to do now is focus on where we are, and this is really hard for me to look at because before COVID and when we were coming here, I was so proud of how far we had come with the dollars that you had given us. But right now, as we sit here, we know that there's increasing needs of Tennesseans. You've heard of them. You've called me about them. We've seen a marked increase in mental illness, a marked increase in addiction, a marked increase in overdose deaths. And these are due to illegal drugs that are coming across our border, as well as an increase in youth who are either attempting suicide or thinking about suicide. Can you believe that as we sit here today, 1 in 5 kids across this state are contemplating suicide? That's the latest stats. Can you believe as we sit here today that the latest data says 1 in 3 high school girls have thought about suicide? Can you believe that 2 weekends ago, my best friend was working at a hospital in Middle Tennessee that serves youth? 26 kids were there, 26 kids from counties throughout the state that had either attempted suicide or so much thought about it that they were in danger to themselves. That's what we're faced with now. If you look at symptoms of anxiety or depression in Tennessee, right before the pandemic, we were looking at 33% of people struggling with that. Now we're down to 37%, but you'll note that we went as high as 43%. We think that that has had lasting implications. Look at this. When you look at from 2011 to 2021, more and more high school youth are reporting feelings of persistent sadness and hopelessness. We've gone from 36% for female to 57%, and male from 21% to 29%. Youth seriously considering suicide. This isn't the latest data, but it's what we had. I just quoted you the latest data. But our source of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey shows you that we've gone from 19% to 30%, again, female, 13%, 14% to male. And then this is the other thing that's really, really hard to look at, substance use. Doesn't make sense. Substance use is down. You look at the data, we've gone from 20% with illicit drugs down to 15%, but we've got more deaths than we've ever had. Why? Because these drugs are laced with fentanyl that's coming across our borders. And we've got a lot of horrible things that are continuing to come across our borders that are killing our people. So it's with that and those individuals in mind that we want to present our budget to you today. You'll note that the first line item is residential reentry housing. In this program, we would like to establish one position in our department that would look at operating 6 residential facilities within the communities. You'll note the total cost of recurring is right at $6-something million. And the recurring, non-recurring is right at $6.7 million. That's $13 million total. Substance use, residential treatment beds, infrastructure enhancement. We are proud that the governor's put in his budget $12 million to have more substance use residential treatment beds across this state. It's our hope that we'll be able to renovate and construct facilities so that the dollars with the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund that provide recurring dollars would be able to help us staff those programs, further leveraging the resources we've got. Provider rate increase. I can't say enough about how important these dollars are. We were here with you last year. We asked for $18 million. That got us to 10% of the 20% that they were behind. This gets us to 15%. And I'm telling you, if you want to look at a real live example of how these dollars matter, with the dollars that have gone to DCS, anybody know how many new applicants they've gotten since they got the new dollars for the new salaries at $50,000? Anybody? 650, 500 is the base, you're right, and then 150 for the leadership positions. Dollars matter. And if you don't have people to serve people, then you can't get what you need to get done. Then you look at the Juvenile Justice Diversion Grant. Here we're asking to expand that. All kinds of incredible outcomes with that grant. Like 95% of these youth do not reoffend. 97% do not recidivate. If you look at the Alliance Healthcare Services, right now Alliance is in our hospital at Memphis Mental Health Institute. They're trying to run a crisis program there. They don't have the space they need. And I'm grateful that the governor put in their $7 million to help leverage their other dollars that they have. The Davidson County Residential Drug Court, this would help us expand that. That's right at 180,000. Our licensure positions, we did a benchmarking of our licensure positions, and we were so woefully understaffed that we realized that we needed at least 4. That still doesn't get us to where our sister agencies are, but it's a start. If you look at our contract and legal positions, in the audience is one of the best general counsels in the state, Zach Griffith. Can't say enough about that man and his leadership. He served in the armed forces and is currently in the National Guard in the state. He's been talking to me for years, I don't know how many years, about we needed more legal positions. And as we've grown our contracts and budget, and we did a benchmark that he did, it was obvious we needed more. Again, the 2 does not get us where we need to go, but it starts to help us. The Tennessee Sports Gambling Fund, as you know, that's non-recurring dollars that come to us. That's right at $2.3 million. And then major maintenance, which you'll see is $450,000. Finally, the Western Mental Health Institute, $62,990,000 for phase 2. And I know Representative Shaw, you asked us a lot of questions about that, so appreciate that. In closing, we're so grateful for your leadership and your support. We hope we've woken you up this morning and raised your spirits. We know that your wise stewardship of our state's amazing resources means that we are able to make landmark investments, taking care of the behavioral health of our neighbors who have no resources or options to do so on their own. One such neighbor in proud Tennessee, and I'd like to point out, is in East Tennessee. This young woman's name is Monica Tucker, and she gave us permission to tell you her story. Here are her words. The girl on the left is Monica. She said, I was the girl everyone called a junkie. I was the one they said would never get clean or amount to anything in life. I was the addict whose family would say she won't go to treatment because she doesn't think she has a problem. I was the addict whose family bought a burial plot because they knew I was going to die from this disease. I was the selfish addict who manipulated and robbed people so I could feed my habit. I was the homeless addict who people would point at and laugh at as they drove down the street. We all know these individuals in our families and communities, and I want to point out where she is today. Now I'm the hopeful, recovering addict who strives to be of service to others. A college graduate, I've got a BSW, and I'm a mother now to my amazing children. I'm the wife who works on her marriage instead of destroying it. I'm the trusting friend who allows others to be there when times get tough. Recovery isn't easy by any imagination, but perseverance is what helps get me through. And also every service and program and person that was hired to help wrap around services to this young woman. In just a few days, she will be celebrating 9 years of recovery. She is one person out of more of 408,000 that I've spoken to you about that your dollars serve every year. It is my hope that you will look upon our budget favorably, because we know that our providers, our family members, our peers, our consumer, our faith-based partners, and our incredible team is committed to take every dollar that you give us in state funding and then to leverage that with every federal dollar that we can get so that we can move forward with the providers that know best what to do in their communities through the private-public partnerships to serve people like Monica. And they do this every day, 408,000 last year. We cannot thank you enough for listening to us, and we cannot thank you enough for your support, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner. You not only woke us up, but cheered us up. It's so wonderful to hear stories of things that have worked and worked well and really made a difference in someone's life. So Sometimes I think we forget that when up here we look at numbers
Yeah.
and we can forget that behind those numbers there are real people whose lives are changed,
Mhm.
hopefully by the better, by the things that we do. And so thank you for, again, very poignantly pointing that out. First on my list of questioners is Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good morning. Thank you
morning.
to you and your team. Thank you for your investment in Knox County. I've seen you there numerous times, and your work with Helen Ross McNabb and Jerry, who I love, who's back there, who does an awesome job. Not leading Helen Ross McNabb anymore, but he's still around, so it's good to see. Just before I ask my question, while there are certainly aspects to be encouraged by in your presentation, it's also very sobering. As having a wife who is a high school teacher and leading what in our school is called the Spiritual Life Office, and how she's dealing with this on a daily basis. And I'll get to my question in just a second, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about the words that were actually spoken by Mayor Adams of New York City just a couple of days ago. And he said, when you take prayer out of schools, of course, this is what happens. And so I just look around, and there is such, I'll say it from a believer's perspective, the enemy is going after our children, looking to steal, kill, and destroy. And man, we need to be on our knees praying for the children of this state, because man, government is an incredible resource, and we can do so much, but there's only so much we can do. And you have Director Roush comes in here and talks about there's literally nothing we can do about fentanyl except pumping the brakes. And those guys we need more resources, which we're going to do. But my goodness, I mean, we need to be in prayer for the children of this state, because it's so many other things. And it just grieves my heart. Chairman Williams was telling me about a recent suicide from a girl who was here at the Capitol last week. And it's just, it's devastating. So thank you for the work that you do. It's critically important. So to that end, last year we appropriated roughly $250 million for the K through 12 mental health trust fund. We appropriated 6.5 recurring for the safety net that you discussed.
Yes, sir.
Can you give us an update? You touched on it briefly, just about the $250 million, the allocation, what that looks like for the resources across the state, and then just an update on the 6.5 and the behavioral health safety net that we've established, and just give us a little more deeper dive into that. You did touch on it, please.
Absolutely. So let's start with the 250 million. As you guys know, that's been set aside in an account. And if you look in the green sheets, it's not in our budget right now. So what we're doing is we're working with UT. We just got a preliminary outline of a study that they've done, because we want the dollars to be utilized where the principals and the teachers and our providers say is the most important programs that they need. So in working with FNA and working with the Treasury, what we're waiting to do is to get that study completed. FNA will then allocate dollars to our account, and then we'll have a plan to spend those dollars. So right now, we're not spending anything out of the 250. It's not allocated. As it relates to the 6 million, actually that expanded the safety net. You guys already had given us money for the behavioral health safety net. And I was saying that we've served upwards of 1,500 kids with that money in 1 year. But in addition to that, you gave dollars to help us serve those kids in need. And those dollars have been used in remarkable ways across the state. One such deep dive I'll do is in West Tennessee, a rural county that Ty Thornton's from, that area. The elementary school there that I'm blanking on the name, Ty, what is? Laura Kendall Elementary. They've taken those dollars and they've actually taken an old office and they've retrofitted it into a therapy office where the provider actually has their individuals there that are doing therapy with kids, doing assessments with kids. Obviously, the parents have to sign off. Want to make sure y'all are aware of that. Nothing's done without a parent signing off. But that's one such program that those dollars have gone for. Another program is where we're working in emergency departments. Helen Ross McNabb has got people that are in the emergency department being able to see kids that come there, because once someone does attempt a suicide, obviously they go to the emergency department. And then we're expanding school-based behavioral health liaisons. We do have one in every county, but we know that there's a need to have more based upon what that county's population is. So those are the kinds of things that are being done. And I'd ask Deputy Commissioner Yancey, is there anything you'd want to add on top of that, sir?
Commissioner, I would just add, when you talk about children's mental
For the
health
record,
representative, I'm
if you
sorry.
just identify yourself and your title.
Yes, ma'am. Matt Yancey, Deputy Commissioner of Community Behavioral Health Programs. Just a couple of other things I would add. When you talk about children's mental health, a lot of advocates and providers say the earlier we start, the better. So of the 6.5 million, we're partnering with providers to work with Head Start centers across the state. Some of them are actually working and partnering with pediatricians' offices, knowing that a lot of parents will go to their primary care doctor when their children need mental health support. So they're co-located there. And then to the commissioner's point about crisis services, really trying to use those $6.5 million to address ED boarding for kids. So we're placing family support specialists doing enhanced crisis care with targeted emergency rooms to help better get kids out of those hospitals as soon as possible and into a more appropriate setting.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Chairman Keesling.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Commissioner, the governor's proposed budget, he's using 12 million in the opioid settlement funds to provide grants for the renovation and or construction of facilities to increase, as you well know, the residential treatment bed capacity. Now, what follows is a four-part question, and I'm not going to read them all four together. I'd like to take one at a time. First, can you provide details around the proposed grant program? Can you enlighten us just a little bit about that, please?
Yes, sir, I can. So again, what we do in the department is we look at data, we see where the highest needs are and where we have providers that can do the most. So that 12 million, what we'll do is an announcement of funding. And what we'd like to do is to have it cover both East, Middle, and West Tennessee.
Grand Division.
Yes,
each one.
sir. So that we have equal representation in those areas to get help. Once those announcement of funds go out, we then rank and rate them based upon guidelines that we put out in what's called a grant announcement. Then we award those funds. At that time, people either construct something, they renovate something, or they add on to a place that they've already got. In the audience are several substance use providers that are really excited about these dollars because right now they're sort of stuck, landlocked where they're at. They can't serve more people if they don't have more beds or they don't have more
Right.
space. So those are the kinds of things that will occur.
Great. Okay. 2, what facilities or entities will be eligible to receive these grant funds? And I think maybe you've already touched on some
Yes,
of that,
sir.
right? Okay. 3, how many beds are you proposing that will help establish the funding? And do you have just sort of a general round number for us?
Well, if you look at, again, we do the announcement of funding, and depending on the property that the group gets to use, it's going to vary. We would like to be able to serve at least 150 new individuals at a time. That's our hope. But I don't want to mislead you because it's going to depend upon what the dollars will allow us to buy, build, renovate, or add on to. It could be.
Location.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
It's what it comes down
Yeah.
to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Property value. Okay. And then finally, is there an estimated time frame for when the grants will be available and ultimately when the increase in bed capacity will be available? So is that just a dart, throwing a dart in the dark right now or not?
Well,
Not necessarily.
Now, let me tell you something, and our providers will tell you this. They're absolutely amazing at drawing down the dollars. We will have that announcement ready by July or August because we prepare. We're hoping it's going to be allocated. When it is, we'll have it ready. And with the new positions that hopefully you'll approve for us to have in our contracts and legal area, they'll be able to get them out. So we would like to have those out July, August, and then have responses back by November, hoping to have things start January of next year.
Great. great, and thank you for your time and
Yes, sir.
being with us today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just a couple follow-ups
Uh-huh.
along those lines. How much of that money has actually come in to date?
Oh, the opioid money,
Mhm.
it's already here,
So-
related to what the governor's proposed.
So
Yeah.
that whole $12 million is here. How is that going to be divided, state and local?
Okay, so those are two different
Right.
questions. So let me go to that one. If you look at the dollars that have been allocated for the opioid trust fund that has the county and the state and the local providers, that's right at 104 million. That's in our budget. You'll see that down here. Again, I want to say how proud we are of our staff because they were able to get the group up and running. We support it. We don't run it, but we have the staff that support it. And to date, we have already allocated $31.4 million to the counties. The counties had a separate approval that come out of that trust fund. With the remaining about 70 million, we're looking at grants going out. I think it's in April, May.
Early summer.
Early summer, okay, for those to go out, and they also will be done with an AOF. But our department does not run that, we staff it. And I think y'all have already heard from Dr. Lloyd and then Mary Shelton, who's the staff member that's the director for that.
And I guess that leads me to another question. You all staff it. There are
Mhm.
administrative costs,
Mhm.
obviously, that go along with distributing this much money,
Mhm.
and then the follow-up that's required to make sure that it's
Mhm.
spent properly and all that. So, what do you think when we look at the percentage of cost for staffing, for
Mhm.
your staff, for the
Mhm.
local staff? uh, How much of the money is actually, do we feel like is going to go to treatment versus, all of the administrative and overhead
Yeah.
costs?
Well, that's a great question. If you look at our overhead cost, it's really, really small. So if you look at one staff member with two staff members that support, and then you look at the money that goes to do the meetings, I would tell you that we've spent under 150,000 right now to date. So I would like to follow up and get you the percentage. I don't have that percentage, but we can for sure email you and say this is what we project the percentage to be, but it's not going to be a lot.
All right, and I know that those are your numbers, but in the
Mhm.
grant request,
Mhm.
the things that you all look at for local, I'm
Mhm.
assuming that admin cost or something that are itemized and that
Mhm.
you all take that into account. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna bet that maybe there's more cost at the local level, but I'm just assuming that. So can you help me?
What we'll do is get with Dr. Lloyd and Mary and have them send you that information because obviously they'll have that from the applications that have come in from the county, and then they'll have it from the provider applications.
All right, I have other people on my list. Representative Garrett, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here so much for what you all do. We appreciate you taking our questions. and
Absolutely.
Enlighten us a little bit. My question revolves around residential reentry housing
Mhm.
program. I believe in the governor's proposed budget, there's $13 million of recurring and non-recurring funds to establish one position and then
Mhm.
operate 6 residential facilities for this program. And these facilities, as I understand them, serve individuals with severe and persistent mental health challenges as they reenter the community from incarceration. So I've got a few questions, but the first one is, it's my understanding the appropriation of the proposed budget is to cover the startup and the operational costs for the facilities. And my
Yes.
question is, how are these facilities going to be staffed?
That's a great question. So again, to Representative Kessling's question, we have to do an announcement of funding. And depending upon what people have currently that they can staff and what they need to build out, what we've allocated is 6.3 million for that to staff them. If you look at what we're wanting to do, we'd like to have 6 residential facilities funded through that 6.7 million infrastructure non-recurring. That would be 2 in each grand division. And we do the same process of doing a grant application. They come in and then they get ranked and rated to see who's the winner of those.
Okay, good deal. And a couple of follow-ups, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
Where will these 6 residential facilities be located, or and follow up to that, do they already exist, or will they
No,
need to be
sir.
built or renovated, or?
Yeah, yeah, they'll need to be built or renovated.
Okay, good. So all 6 of them will be new facilities.
Yes, sir.
Good deal. And then my final question on this subject, and I appreciate you answering these
Uh-huh.
questions, is how many people will each facility serve?
We're hoping to serve 530 individuals annually. I'm sorry, 108 beds total, disregard. 108 beds total with that. But like I said earlier, it could go up, it could go down. It really depends upon what we get in. But our hope is 108 beds total.
Great. Commissioner, thank you very much, and your
Thank you.
team. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
Before I get to my question, I do want to thank you for acknowledging in your introduction the role that hope plays in
Mhm.
mental health and how that
Mhm.
interplays with Chairman Zachary talking about faith and the role
Mhm.
that plays.
Mhm.
We couldn't talk about that enough this morning as far as I'm concerned, but I
Mhm.
thank you all for being here.
Mhm.
I won't waste too much time getting
That's
on my
fine.
soapbox with
That's
that.
fine.
This past fall, we introduced the school safety toolkit for Tennessee families that was launched. And there was a joint effort of multiple departments there. Could you talk about the role that your department played in that launch and the
Mhm.
rollout of that toolkit and kind of just give us an update on how that's going?
Absolutely. Well, number one, we know that this is a very important issue across our state, and really grateful for Governor Lee pulling together all the different departments to do everything we could to make a difference. I will ask our Deputy Commissioner, Matt Yancey, because he really was the boots on the ground that worked with all the other departments to put the toolkit together. And so, Matt, would you respond to that?
Yes, ma'am. Representative, we have been working in partnership with the governor's office, the Department of Education, Homeland Security, Commerce and Insurance for probably the past 7, 8 months, focused on school safety. One of the deliverables of that work group was this toolkit. Our department and the experts back at our department who oversee our children's mental health work really took the lead in helping create the content for that. More recently, we've been working closely with the Director for Homeland Security and connecting those local Homeland Security agents to the aforementioned school-based behavioral health liaisons. We actually did a presentation, I think 2 weeks ago, to the local Homeland Security agents. They've participated in staff meetings that we've held with the school-based liaisons. So we're trying to make sure that these entities are working together, coordinating, communicating, and collaborating to ensure that schools are as safe as possible. But this work group continues, and there's more work ahead of us.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up, can you talk about what type of participation we have so far, what type of successes we've seen from that toolkit, and also if there are any challenges that you're facing?
As far as feedback on the toolkit, I have not received feedback directly. I will say that we're continuing to reference it and disseminate the toolkit as broadly as possible. It's a great resource, but it's not the only resource out there. One of the things that we are doing as a department in partnership with the other departments is educating people about 988. 988 is the new crisis line for our state, for the entire country. It's a very easy to remember number, obviously, and we're doing everything we can to educate schools, students about that resource because it's saving people's lives. And that's been a big focal area for this school safety work group is how do we educate schools about 988. It connects back to our statewide mobile crisis teams that we have across Tennessee. And it's just a really wonderful resource that we need to make sure more people are aware of.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for being here this morning.
Absolutely. I want to say one thing because you brought this up, as has Representative Zachary, and it has to do with faith and prayer. One thing that we truly believe and have shown in action is that faith-based communities have a lot of the answers in our state to help a lot of these concerns. We hired a faith-based leader, Dr. Monty Burks. I'm sure many of you have met him. And he has gone out with our 3 faith-based coordinators across the state. And actually in the audience is the director of that program, Jessica Youngbloom. I can't tell you how important that is because so often congregations and people that don't understand addiction or anxiety or suicidality or depression think it's something you can just pray away. And we really believe it's prayer plus whatever the medicine or the therapy is together, that both of those things combined get you to the best outcome you could ever get to. And so I just want you to know that that's near and dear to our heart. It's something that we put dollars into and that we have staff to help across the state. It's very important.
Just a personal anecdote. A good friend of my son's, a young lady, when they were in high school, suffered with really significant depression, and there was just a lot of folks who were, like, move on, get over it kind of attitude. And I thought she had the most wonderful comment. She said, "If I was diabetic, you wouldn't tell me just to go make some insulin for my body." And mental health, it's a disease that needs treatment, just like the other physical diseases that we're much more aware of and sometimes more, I guess, sympathetic to. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Thank you, you and your team. And I just want to make a quick comment. I appreciate you so very much for many reasons. And being a pastor, I get that sometimes.
Representative Shaw, I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you, be very rude, and I apologize. But Senator Powers has a group that sat here for, evidently we bored them early and they have decided to move on. But we do want to recognize Senator Powers and the Scout group with him. Thank you for being here. And I'm sorry, Representative Shaw, please reestablish your thought.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank you for that. Thank you so much. Being a pastor, I do recognize that so much, and that's why I think it is important for us to understand that sometimes we are limited in our spiritual efforts to reach people. And I find in the church now more than ever that there are people who need counseling for mental health issues. Matter of fact, was speaking to someone this morning and talked about how important it is for us to know that sometimes we need to seek out for more than just spiritual help. Opinions are not very important. However, I think maybe we sometimes blame things on people that's not so. When we say that we took prayer away from school and all, but I don't think God would limit us as to where we could pray. I don't think he would be the God that he is if I couldn't pray when I needed to. I may have to pray in a different fashion, but I just think that I can pray whenever. But it is important for us to realize that because that is a great issue. But I want to talk a little bit about Western and then maybe a couple other things. I know that the $63 million you talked about,
yes, sir.
Is this in addition to the dining area as adding more to the hospital? Let me just ask you in that fashion.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate that question. I'm going to ask Deputy Commissioner Gunderson to respond to that.
If you would turn your mic on and identify yourself, please.
Deputy Commissioner Heather Gunderson, Deputy of Administrative and Regulatory Services for the department. We're really excited about Phase 2 of Western, so that will finally replace our very old from the 1800s kitchen facility and give us places to have food preparation, cook on site. It'll give us adjunctive therapy services, basically things that were not direct patient care. It will allow us to do. It'll allow us to provide more occupational therapy things for the programming for the patients, and also give us some additional beds, which we're excited about. So this is a big ask for us, and we're excited about it.
I know you're serving 24 counties now with 150 beds. How many beds will this increase at the hospital?
At 25 additional beds.
25 additions, good, good. And of course, there is a demand for this increase, I would probably think, based upon what you already talked about.
Absolutely. I mean, when the hospital was built, it was just patient care areas and that was it. And so it really didn't have any of those additional support services that the hospital really needs. So we're still using very old buildings. We're still spread all over the campus and we don't have any place for the administration. And for those of you that don't know, we had a kitchen failure over last summer. So we're in a temporary kitchen unit. So this is very badly needed. And it really just finishes out the hospital that as it was intended to be. It was just the second phase just hasn't been done yet.
Yes, sir. Western actually is at 91% capacity today as we sit. So we're going to need those beds.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. What's the timeline we're talking about for?
We're actually meeting now. I mean, this week we'll be meeting to talk about the programming. So as soon as we can, because it's really urgent, like we said, we are in a temporary unit. So if we can get the funding allocated for this July, we're going to try to start the pre-planning now so that we can get those contracts, construction contracts out as soon as this summer as possible.
Yes, sir.
And one final question. I know that there's a critical need for Quinco programs throughout the community, and they're doing an awesome job. I can tell you, awesome job. Are we funding those programs, Commissioner, in your opinion, to the capacity we need to?
Well, as I say, every year we're grateful for every dollar we get. We are grateful for the budget that the governor's put forward. And we know that every dollar is going to go to meet more of the needs. And so we just stand grateful for what we have and appreciate the question, but really support what we've requested. One of the things that I've talked about is the need on the workforce shortage. You know, if you don't have workers, you can't do the work. So we just know that we are grateful for what we've asked for.
Well, I know this is kind of a loaded question for you, but
I was praying for what that answer was going to be.
I realize how important those programs.
Yeah, I'm going to keep on praying on that.
I realize how important they are in the community and what they do for our community. Because again, I think sometimes you have to be on the other side of the coin to see how many people are struggling.
Yes, sir.
In so many ways, and especially getting back to that faith issue, those people who seemingly that sometimes there's a challenge between people who are trying to understand God's way and the issues that they are dealing with. And I'm finding that that's growing in our communities more than ever. And if you could just speak about that for just a moment, I'll leave you alone and get off the mic.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can look at that picture right there. And that tells you all you need to know. That young lady, before she got the help she needed, was a mother. And if you look at her on the left, think about what her kids thought when she was in her addiction. She also was a child to a parent. They bought a burial plot for her. You can imagine the anguish and the anxiety that they felt. And you can look at her life and see that she didn't have a job. She was homeless. She was living on the streets. As I said before, we have a huge need in this state and it's only growing. And I cannot think of better providers in this state than the ones that are out here and the ones that are sitting watching this from home who have texted me this morning. The people that are working in our hospitals that are looking to you all to give the dollars needed to serve those Tennesseans just like Monica. And again, we are so grateful for every dollar you've given us. You've really increased our budgets. And I know the providers would agree with me. They are grateful as well. So again, I hope that helps you with that response. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Commissioner. I again it is a huge issue, and I had to step out during part of your presentation, but look through the slides and just really sobering numbers. And one of my colleagues mentioned a situation of a young person who visited this this Capitol and sat through our session last week, and then went home and committed suicide, an irrevocable act. So it is just finding those folks who are in such dark place and being able to help them is obviously we talk a lot about in Tennessee. We want to be accountable, we want to be responsible, but we also want to take care of those who can't take care of themselves, and people in this kind of situation are really very vulnerable and need our help. So we're grateful to you and the department and all the people and all of the providers that work with you all to actually provide frontline care for these folks, and we can't say thank you enough for that. Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Commissioner. It's certainly good again
Absolutely.
to see you here. Just a couple of questions regarding FSAG and the funding that was awarded to the department. So $41 million in federal COVID funding, and there were two initiatives, if I remember correctly, the Crisis Continuum Enhancement and the Project Rural Recovers. Those two projects is what I'd like to focus on for just a second. First of all, can you just provide a brief description or update on, I guess I should say, on these two initiatives?
Well, first off, I'll tell you that the director of that program's in our audience, Jessica Youngbloom. And on the Project Rural Recovery, we are in the process of getting the vans to have them equipped to be able to go out into the rural communities that this is focusing on. As you guys know, we already have vans with some of our providers that are serving rural counties, actually going and being in that county. So instead of trying to get the person to come to us, we're going to them, and it's having incredible outcomes. And then on the second proposal, I'd like to ask Deputy Commissioner Yancey if he could speak to that one.
Yes, Representative Hicks, we used that 41 million to expand our crisis continuum, specifically creating new crisis stabilization units, crisis walk-in centers. So in keeping with how we generally do business, we put out an announcement of funding, focusing on certain areas of the state where we knew we needed to place these resources. Clarksville is one of those communities. The growing area south of Nashville, that Rutherford County, Williamson County area. And of course, over in, I believe, West Tennessee, there's another location there around Dyersburg that we're also standing up a new CSU. They're in varying stages of development now. We should have those online next year. A couple of the facilities are repurposing space. They're renovating existing space. Other providers are having to start from the ground up.
So you don't see any problem with being able to spend this money in a timely fashion?
No, sir.
Okay.
No. As a matter of fact, Ben Middleton's in the audience, Centerstone. We're so excited because he's actually going to be starting his first crisis stabilization unit in this state, and that'll round us off. And then we've got Jimmy Jackson, who's also from West Tennessee, as well as our CEOs on the substance abuse side. Do you mind if I ask the CEOs to rise so y'all can see who they are? They're amazing. Can all of y'all rise? CEOs, directors of programs, mental health, substance use.
Wow.
All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Williams, for your good work in this area. And I thought I'd let you know I found your stories to be very moving. I want to ask a few more questions as we, I guess, begin to wrap up on the provider rate increases.
Yes, sir.
Can you maybe start by letting us know whether the current budget, I think, has $9 million in recurring funding for this. Has that had an even effect across providers across the department, or are there some areas and programs in your department that are experiencing greater shortages or greater needs than others?
Thank you so much for asking that. When we came before you last year and asked for the 18 million, our original proposal was 36 million. And that was to be able to get us to the 20% that they have not gotten over the last 20 years. And so that was really important to us, and that hit all programs. So what we did under Deputy Commissioner Yancey's leadership, and we've got Assistant Commissioner Sloss and Assistant Commissioner Cotterman in the audience, they went through and actually allocated those dollars where each provider would get 10% in the first year, and they sort of ranged differently on the safety net, because on the safety net, we wanted to mirror TennCare rates because they're the same kind of codes, CPT codes. And then this year with this additional 9 million, we're looking at giving around a 5% increase. And we're going to do the same thing and also look at the TennCare rates. So it's really going evenly pretty much across all the providers, prorated based upon the dollars that they currently get so that they can hire individuals. And I can tell you that last year, when those dollars started rolling out, we got emails from people. I talked to staff that were crying, saying, hey, I get to stay here. I was going to have to leave and go somewhere else. Matt was saying earlier, currently we're in a system where the dollars allow us to pay bachelor's level a lot less than other bachelor's levels. So we're trying to get those up. Master's level, right now, if you look at the DCS workers, our master's level are going to make less than that. So I'm probably going to be back here again next year going, we got to do something about that. But again, this will go a long way.
It sounds like last year's 18 million,
Uh-huh.
this year's proposed 9 million gets you to the 15% level 2 years
Yes, sir.
combined.
Yes,
But
sir.
your goal is the 20% level.
Yes, sir.
So we're not quite there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
And
thank
it
you.
may be larger than that, again, after we look at what the impacts are with other raises that have gone into effect.
Sure, it just helps us to see how far along we are towards our goals.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Bond. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much. The photo on the screen has been referenced several times.
Mhm.
Monica grew up in my district, and Monica
Mm.
has become a dear friend. And I'll tell you,
Mm.
I can remember very vividly the day that I met her. It was June 29th, 2018. I met she and another one of her friends, Polly Jessen, in Blount County as we were kicking off the Tennessee Together program. And they were two of the original recovery navigators in the
Yeah.
state,
Yeah.
doing amazing work. And both Monica and Polly are doing tremendous work in Northeast Tennessee right now as we speak. And I'm a better person for knowing those two people and what they've been able to do. I'll go ahead. The discussion came from my colleague to the right and two colleagues behind me. I'll go ahead and put a fine point on it. Although you are very grateful for what has been presented in the budget document for the $9 million additional to provide a rate increase, $9 million more would go a long way. So as this committee deliberates what we are looking at in terms of investing our state dollars, I would encourage this committee to put the additional $9 million that we have been tiptoeing around for the last 30 minutes, go ahead and put that into a budget document on a recurring basis, because the value that it's going to provide to our residents is immeasurable, as we've heard already. Our providers out there have taken a leap of faith, and they're already paying some of these wages in many circumstances. So as a bit of encouragement, Commissioner, although you can't ask for it, I'm going to encourage this committee to get behind an additional $9 million for our provider rate increases. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I want to thank my colleagues for mentioning faith. A few years ago, we did the opioid mental health roundtable at my church. We
Yes,
pretty
sir.
much leveraged
Yeah.
faith community, and I've often shared the letter when I asked about what is a key silver bullet we could use, and that was from the late Dr. Linda Gilbert, and she had shared the behaviors of the 6 to 9-year-olds are like something we've never seen before. This was 3 years ago. She mentioned how they were disorderly, disruptive, and aggressive. And while we were bringing all our resources into play, there's no place for these children to go to be assessed and treated but she goes on to compliment the Department of Education and goes on to compliment your department as well. I do a little radio show back home, and we talk about faith quite often. I had a guy give his testimony Sunday night. Tyler Bowman is his name. He was an addict and turned his life around, and faith was a key component. Now he's got his own recovery program, Brooks Healing Recovery in Normandy. Had another gentleman on the radio with me about 2 years ago, Gene Garcia, who heads up Teen Challenge in Middle Tennessee. And he had mentioned the word hope. He said he seen a truck that said something about hope on it. He said, man, that's what I need. I need some hope. And he just called on the name of Jesus right then. And he said, bam, he was healed of heroin. I thought, man, how much did that cost the taxpayers? How much did it cost it? Got another, Rhonda Rush, another one back home. It's a strong advocate. Jolie Millette, so many others that I could go on, Josh Floyd, that I can say faith was the key component, and it cost the taxpayers $0. So I just want to tell you, thank you. And thank you to the chair lady and Zachary and some others who are compassionate about these issues. I've seen it in my family. My stepfather was a state investigator, and his own daughter, my stepsister, had a bad drug problem years ago. So I've seen it. It's affected almost every person. I've had to call a mother to tell her to come to the ER. Her son had passed away. And when you see these things, you see it personally. It does affect you. So thank you, and thank you to your staff and the providers, and especially the faith-based areas. Thank you, ma'am.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, as everyone said, you all do an outstanding job. So thank you all for your work and your service. I too was at the meeting there in Knoxville, where it was a great meeting with the county commission, city council, I think both mayors. But I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a major part of that meeting and concern is the distance between Knoxville and even upper East Tennessee and the closest facility, which is Moccasin Bend in Chattanooga. I know we had a facility there, and there is a need in terms of the unfortunate need to have a mental health facility like that. Is that on your drawing board? Is that in your strategic plans? Where are we? Because I just don't see Moccasin Bend being sustainable when you're talking about, again, going from Bristol down and with major facilities like that. So.
Right. I really appreciate you asking that question, because one of the things we tried to address in that meeting is we didn't just vacate Knoxville when Lakeshore closed. What we did is we contracted with 3 hospitals in that region. So you've got Peninsula that we had the contract with. You've got Ballad Health in Upper East, and then you've got Ridgeview, which is where our 3rd contract is. And when you do the comparison of numbers of people served that were being served at Lakeshore prior to these contracts, we're serving almost triple the number in inpatient hospitalization. However, there are some individuals that have really, really high needs that those contracts aren't able to serve, and then they come to Moccasin Bend, and we had created a 25-bed unit there for that particular situation. So at this moment, what we're continuing to do is to support this private-public partnership, and hoping that with the new empath unit, I'm sure you've seen Helen Ross McNabb is looking at increasing that. Monica Blanton Kitts is their new CEO. We're very excited about that. That's going to serve a lot of individuals that currently aren't getting served. And then we're in conversations about other facilities. But right now, we're actually serving more people than what we served when Lakeshore was there.
Representative McKenzie.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I definitely see that and agree. But as you laid out during this, the need is greater now. It's an unfortunate reality in terms of the numbers. So I just ask that you continue to understand it's tough on the sheriff department to make those drives. And so just really, I'm hoping that the Helen Ross McNabb facility will
alleviate some of that, but
Yes,
thank you
sir.
for your
And
consideration.
yes, sir, I track every month the sheriff's transports to Moccasin Bend. One thing that sort of gets conflated with that are the transports that they do with privately insured individuals. I can tell you that it has gone up from what we've been tracking during the pandemic. And that's something that we're talking about. Is there a solution that we could have for that? So I promise you that's something that I look at, that Ty Thornton is our Chief of Hospital Operations looks at every day. And we do appreciate that. We know it's hard. The second thing we've done is we've expanded telehealth. So if we can get the person assessed, then the sheriff doesn't need to make that transport. So we're hoping that that helps as well. Thank you.
And Commissioner Williams, you almost made it out of here, but you said the magic words, and I would be really remiss if I didn't follow up on Moccasin Bend, an issue that you and I speak about on a regular basis, and just ask for an update where we are on replacing
ma'am.
that facility.
Yes, ma'am. I so appreciate you asking that. And I always appreciate the conversations that we have had. Here's where we're at today. There is movement. As you know, back in the early part of the winter, we got approval to move forward and to look at different sites. And so that original amount of $276,520,000 that has been approved, the Department of General Services has worked with our team very closely, and we are now looking at 4 major sites. There were 5 that they brought to us, but I think we're going to only be looking at 4 because one seems to be really cost prohibitive. We meet with them this week. Once I meet with them, I will talk with the governor and talk with FNA about what they believe is in the best interest of taxpayer dollars. And then we will meet with you and your counterparts to talk through that. So we now have high level, here's cost, here's what the build out would be.
Well, as you and I have said, and most people probably recognize patience is not a virtue of mine, and this has been a process for over a year. We've
Yep.
been talking, so I'm glad to see that there's movement, and
Yes,
hopefully
ma'am.
within the next few weeks we can actually choose an option and move forward. Because while we set aside those FSAG dollars for this replacement, while we've been thinking, costs have just been escalating. So
Yes, ma'am.
that's a continued and ongoing concern. But I thank you. It's something that I know you're committed to, as I am.
Absolutely.
That facility has been like its sister facility in West Tennessee. It's needed a lot of work for a long time.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here this morning, always bringing your energy, enthusiasm. And it's a very difficult task that you all do. And it's just rewarding, I think, for us to see and hear the commitment that from not only from the folks in state government, but those folks in our provider communities without whom we cannot do this work. So thank you all for your attendance today. But mostly, we're just grateful for the work that you do every day on behalf of Tennesseans. So we're going to let you get on back to go choose my site for Moccasin Bend.
We're praying on that too.
Pray harder. Pray faster.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Have a blessed day.
Next on our list is Logan Grant with Commission on Health Facilities. If we can get that team up here. Welcome and thank you. I know we ran a bit over time with the previous presenter. There's always a lot of discussion around mental health, which is just a growing crisis in our state and this country. So we appreciate your patience. We have no patience, but we're glad that you do. And now I just ask you to go straight into your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, members of the House Finance Committee. My name is Logan Grant. I'm the Executive Director for the Health Facilities Commission. With me is John Carr. He's our Director of Administration and Budget. And I'll just get right into it. As you know, last year, the General Assembly passed Public Chapter 1119, which took the Office of Healthcare Facilities and the Board for Licensing Healthcare Facilities, which had been administratively attached to the Department of Health, and moved it over to us and renamed us. We were then Health Services Development Agency, renamed us to Health Facilities Commission. That was effective July 1 of last year. So we've been primarily our day-to-day work has been kind of working through that merger, integrating our staff, making sure that there are no breaks in or gaps in the services that we are providing, making sure that we're responsive to members of the community and our federal partners at CMS, for whom we are the state surveying authority for Medicare and Medicaid facilities. It did greatly expand the size of our organization. We were 12 full-time staff on June 30th, 2020, was it 2022? And now we are somewhere upwards of 187. So there was a major change for our organization, but one that we think has been handled as well as it can be. There's obviously no textbook for how to manage something like that, so we've had to learn some lessons along the way. But Tennesseans can rely on the Health Facilities Commission to continue providing the oversight of surveying of facilities. So with that, there are 3 budgetary increases I'd like to mention briefly. All of these budget increases were funded in the proposed in the governor's budget, and none of them come from the general fund. They are all from dedicated revenues sources. First is the recurring cost of an online certificate of need system. We've been working with vendor on the development of that, and we have every expectation of having it online and functional well ahead of its July 1 statutory requirement. There's an additional position to support the certificate of need function that we are requesting, primarily to process invoices. One of the ways that we've shifted revenue to allow our revenue sources to allow us to reduce the cost of CON applications is by collecting fees on the licensure types that are governed by CON. So we underestimated, frankly, how much of an administrative burden that was going to be for our financial staff, because we are kind of lean in that area. So we requested an additional position to help us process those invoices from those providers, because there's several thousand every year. There's also funding for an additional position with a trauma fund. The trauma fund, the trauma system program has been around for a long time, and right now it still only has 1 full-time position associated with it. And however, the number of trauma centers that are surveyed and licensed have doubled over the past, I want to say 10 years. Start was 9 10 years ago, and is upwards of 18, which is a great thing for Tennesseans who want to see higher quality care in hospitals. However, it is an administrative burden for that particular employee, so we've requested to have 1 brought on to support that person. Those are the 3 cost increases we requested. Other than that, our budget is as we received it from the Department of Health, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that very succinct report. And we have some questioners. Chairman Williams, we'll let you begin.
Thank you for coming today. Just to follow up on the Health Facilities Commission, Public Chapter 1119 says, we're going to phase this out. The licensure is going to be married together. I wondered if you could share with us a little bit about that process. I think they were trying to eliminate it by July of 26. I know there's some bills to try to eliminate it before then. Just wondered if you could talk to me about the elimination process, what that looks like, and what the overall implication might be to the process itself. If you could
Yes,
share.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So I know that certificate of need reform has been a major issue for a while, and that's why the CON working group came together in 2019, composed of members from the House and Senate, recognizing that CON, whether you like it or not, it does have a significant impact on the healthcare market in Tennessee. And so rather than, in the interest of minimizing disruption and proceeding in an orderly fashion. They wanted to come up with a plan, you know, to eventually remove certificate of need from the statute. Now, what we've been doing in the meantime is getting things in place so that when CON is removed, there is still a mechanism to ensure that projects are evaluated based on quality and the advantage to consumers. But moving away, obviously, from need and things like that. So what the General Assembly asked us to do is provide a plan, which we did last December, which will kind of broke it up into a couple phases. The first phase will be legislation that is pursued this year, which will consolidate the Board for Licensing Healthcare Facilities and the RCON board into a single governing body. And the reasoning for this, for the CON working group's vision, was that part of the problem with CON was that when people come to discuss a project, they say, well, you know, provide this standard of quality care. There's also this amount of charity care we're going to provide to the community. But because it's just a gatekeeping function, once they obtain their CON, there's no ongoing regulatory mechanism to really compel them to adhere to that. So part of the reason why you want to bring the licensure and merge the licensure and CON functions is so that there is a board with ongoing regulatory authority. And that's something that we're looking at, how we're going to actually enact. How are we going to, what is a reasonable expectation for Tennesseans to have for healthcare facilities in the state in terms of charity care and things like that, and then how we're going to enforce it. So we still have some details to work through on that end, but of course, we are state government, so we have to do kind of one major step at a time. Last year, we took the 168 employees from the Department of Health and took on responsibility for the Board for Licensing Healthcare Facilities. This year, we'll be merging those two boards. Well, legislatively, it'll be passed this year. It'll go into effect July 1, 2024, giving us enough time to make sure that all the appointments are made and develop an onboarding process for the new members. So I think there's going to be ongoing conversations after session this year for legislation next year, which would ultimately set the pathway for the elimination of CON, which I believe would be phased in because there is going to be a new process in place. We want to work out some of the details of what that's going to look like. And of course, we're going to need some time to make sure it's all troubleshooted and it will function on day one. So we're requesting a little bit of time to get all that in order. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, as a part of this closure or this, there has been some discussion about provisional licensure as it relates to construction. You may or may not know this, but this committee is talking about speeding up building roads here in budget finance, and we're trying to speed up how to deliver construction projects to the SBC as it relates to college campuses. So if you were to allow for a special a provisional license, if you will, in this new process that you're trying to roll out, do you ever foresee, because that would allow someone to start construction, which would speed the process up, is there a way or a mechanism by which you've discussed that you can preserve that provisional licensure so that an actual license could occur after? Or do you see that having them separated is a good thing, or would you think it'd be better to go for full licensure with the idea through the CON, with the idea is no one could change their mind? We wouldn't want a hospital in my district to spend an $85,000 or $85 million facility only to find out they didn't get licensure for it.
Correct. Very good question, sir. That is what we're looking at doing, because if there's still going to be analysis on the front end to make sure that a proposed project will meet quality and consumer advantage standards, once that is done on the front end before they have to make the investment in all the architectural designs and things like that, they will of course have to know where it's going to be built. But then once that is approved, they would be provided a provisional license number, which they could then continue to go forward now. And then that provisional license would be administratively activated once they have complied with all state rules and regulations. So they wouldn't have to go before the board again. The ball would kind of be in their court. And we're also looking at finding ways to hopefully try and look for efficiencies, for ways that we can be more flexible in our surveying schedule, because we know that they have a lot of not just state but local and federal inspections that need to take place. And sometimes if they are tied to a specific order, if one person on the early in that process gets delayed, it can kind of cause disruptions to the whole process. So we're looking for ways that we can be flexible to try and ultimately be more expeditious.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your comments, Director Grant. As we switch from the con laws to the special health licensing, will the fees that we charge as a state be the same, or will that fee structure change?
It's a very good question, sir. We haven't evaluated that yet. One of the things that we're in the process of doing, John and Alicia Grice, his deputy, we're working on a long-term financial estimate for what our needs are going to be. And then we're going to start trying to evaluate, okay, based on our resources, what makes sense. Because I would agree in concept that if we're going to be eliminating CON, it doesn't seem fair that they should necessarily be paying for a program that no longer exists. But that said, we're still going to need to find a way to plug that hole. We just need to find an equitable way of doing that.
Sure. And under the current con laws, how much in fees do we generate?
I defer to John. I want to say 1.2 million.
We budget, John Carr, Director of Administration. Chairman, we budget $1.4 million for the health planning fees, and then we also budget about $400,000 for the CON fee right now, so roughly $1.9 million.
Okay, and where is that money placed? Is it in your department's general budget?
It is a dedicated funding source, yes, sir.
Okay, so it's earmarked for certain
Yes, sir.
things, and what are those?
Basically, it's the operation of the CON program as a whole, staffing and other operating costs.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in 2022, we required an electronic certificate of need application. And so to implement that, it was going to cost about $750,000. That was going to come from your reserves. Can you tell me, has that reserve funding been utilized for the startup costs? And if so, how much?
Yes, sir, it has. We've had to, we initially negotiated, I think, $650,000, but then once we got it more into the plan of work, then it was discovered that we were going to actually use, I think we're
very close to the 750, yes, sir.
Okay. And then just one quick follow-up to that. So this upcoming budget, so includes $200,000 in recurring state funding for the software licensing and maintenance of that electronic application system. So could we use certificate of need fee revenue for that? I mean, could we not just use that funding for that purpose? And if not,
That
tell me why.
is the way it's proposed in the governor's budget.
Okay. So the way that it's proposed is that we would use certificate of need fee revenue for that.
Correct.
Yes, sir. Okay. Got it.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Grant, good to see you. Tell me, as the General Assembly looks to further reduce regulatory burdens on the Tennessee citizens and businesses, are we stacking licensure along with CON to create CON 2.0, or are we looking toward real reforms in this licensure process?
That's a very good question. We are absolutely eliminating substantial regulation with the special health services license. So right now, the certificate of need program looks at not only based on some of the previous reforms of the CON working group, and originally it was need and economic feasibility and orderly or contribution to the orderly development of healthcare. Those were the three criteria by which CON applications were evaluated prior to 2016. Speaker Sexton really led the way in getting this whole CON reform process started in 2016. And at that point, his very first step to changing that was to add quality as a method by which or modality by which they are evaluated. And then subsequently in 2021, when there was a major reform to the CON program, they eliminated economic feasibility, and then they replaced orderly development of healthcare with consumer advantage. Now, it can be disputed by some that they are totally different. I'd say there's a bit of a Venn diagram of what you're looking at when you're contrasting orderly development of healthcare with consumer advantage. Orderly development of healthcare historically was essentially, what is the impact going to be on existing providers? And that was essentially the main focus. By shifting it to consumer advantage. It was a, philosophical shift in how it's evaluated. Now, that is admittedly a subjective shift, but one that I think the board members clearly have recognized. There have been several applications that have been approved since the implementation of that law, which were previously denied under the old system. There's a lot more as folks are coming to the Certificate of Need Board, asking for approval. Those who are opposing on the grounds of it would be disruptive to existing providers. A lot of those applications, which I believe would have been denied under the old system, are now getting approved. We have already moved. I think I tend to think of things in a historical way, and so I think that we are continuing the move towards a focus solely on quality and consumer advantage. I think that has already taken place in some major ways, but this is not going to be just CON 2.0. We are the plan that I recommend to the General Assembly preserves some aspects of CON, and again, we're going to be talking through some of those, and I'm really just trying to be as faithful to the vision of the CON working group as I can. And so, but people will still be able to oppose applications on quality grounds, and that there's a disadvantage to the consumers. But I think it can be a very useful analysis when you're looking at the placement of a hospital, for example, in a community. By preserving that process, you can also have input from the community themselves. It's not just providers that can have a say, and not infrequently we have members of the community come and voice their concerns, often in support, sometimes in opposition to proposed projects. But I would say there are a few similarities, but largely it will be very, very different from any CON program in the state. In the country.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your answer, Mr. Grant. In our health subcommittee this week, and it's been on calendar before, we are going to be discussing repeal versus reform, and that's been the question that's been asked for quite some time. I think many folks are leaning toward reform, which is what you have suggested to us. We're going to be debating the repeal aspect of it too. So that's very good to get your perspective, and I'm sure we'll see you on tomorrow as well as that issue comes up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Grant, we appreciate going from 12 employees to, what was that number, 187, and a budget that I don't even know how many times it multiplied. It was exponential growth. So congratulations on managing that and keeping the process working, keeping the plane flying as we're changing out all the parts. So we do appreciate what you've done. And we're next going to hear from the Department of Labor. We would ask them to come forward. Welcome, and it's now officially welcome. Good afternoon. And I congratulate my colleagues who have managed to still be with us. We are the few, the proud. Our Army guy left, so I guess we must be the Marines. But Commissioner, welcome, and we thank you in advance for the work that's being done, and we're so grateful that we're not here to talk about this time the unanswered calls in our unemployment lines. We have a whole different set of problems, I think, to focus on now, and that is the low unemployment rate and finding enough workers. So please share with us what your department is doing in that regard, along with any other information you'd like for us to know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the committee members as well. We're here to present our 2023
Can you hear me now? My apologies. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to present our 2023-24 annual budget for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. My name is Denise Thomas, newly appointed commissioner, 5 months in now.
And
Joining,
congratulations on that.
thank you very much, Chairman Hazelwood. Joining me on my left is our CFO, Andy Summer. To my right is Stamatia Cece, who probably needs no introduction. She's our legislative liaison and chief of staff. And next to her is Administrator Troy Haley with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So our budget, our base budget is approximately $131 million with increases that we will talk about specifically that raises it to somewhere around 146. Over the last couple of years, we certainly appreciate the investment in state funding that the department has received. That's been somewhat of a different trajectory for us. We're primarily federally funded. Roughly 65% of our funds are federal. With the help of the General Assembly, we've been able to get some much needed state funding to really focus on those workforce initiatives that are paramount to the state of Tennessee. One of those areas has been apprenticeship. We're pleased to announce that we have roughly 7,200 apprentices across our state, which is a significant increase. Despite the phone calls that many of you fielded in your offices that went up, we also saw apprenticeship go up during the pandemic, which was something that was unexpected but welcome. So we're happy to see the number of apprentices rising in our state. We're also seeing this around non-traditional sectors. As you know, we entered into a formal MOU with Department of Education around your Grow Your Own Teacher Apprenticeship. We'll dedicate apprenticeship funds to make sure we have educators for the future. We have 350 registered apprenticeship programs. That number is also increasing. We're working with our partners, not just in education, but also around healthcare as well, to stimulate the number of apprentices we can have, as we know we have growing demands in the healthcare sector. Reentry was the second area of investment. We've served to date over 8,000 justice-involved individuals that are returning from incarceration to help them gain employment. The tablet program, we have 6,343 tablets being deployed into county jails. As a refresher, this will help individuals not only be able to continue and matriculate for their high school equivalency exam, but there's workforce development training as well, so that these folks can be in the chute to get much needed training to go to work once they're done. Around our unemployment trust fund, our December 22 reading was $1.261 billion, although I think our CFO has an update on that. And our employer premiums remain at the lowest rate table in tax wage base. And with that, we have a couple of cost increase to discuss. One is our strategic workforce initiative around summer youth program. The summer youth program is one that we are certainly excited about. This gives the opportunity for youth, and for our definition of youth, that can range as young as 14 and up to ages 24. So we still term those older youth, young adults, under the youth program. This is a career exploration program that allows those youth to be able to work and have wages over the summer. Primarily, not only does this help them just to work, but to also get into those high need areas. So hopefully they will get some hands-on experience and want to return each summer, and we can get them in the pipeline so that as they're thinking about training or their future careers, we can make sure that that's married to this program. It's important to note the summer youth program is of no cost to the employer. Our local workforce providers across the state will be employers of record. So the youth are actually vetted, orientated, and they actually work for them. So any insurance and all of those things are maintained by the local workforce providers. That's $15 million. That will allow us to serve many youth, many of which we know will come from low-income households, but particularly those that are aging out of foster care, which has been a primary focus. The second is our strategic workforce initiative, which includes 2 positions. These are positions that will help us with our state-focused workforce initiatives. As I mentioned, because we're federally funded primarily, often those are federal programs and federal metrics, so we don't have the staff to necessarily focus on the things that are important to Tennessee, because all the funding is directed and earmarked toward a particular program. This will allow us to put specific interests and efforts into rural workforce development, which one of those positions will be primarily charged with. And the second will be making sure that we have a workforce strategy that is specific to the needs of Tennessee and not just those from the federal U.S. Department of Labor. And with that, I'll yield to our CFO to talk through our funding increases and then our Administrator Haley to round them out.
Andy Summer, Chief Financial Officer. The third cost increase is related to our administrative division. That's our division that oversees all of our divisions within Department of Labor. It includes our Commissioner Suite, Human Resources, Fiscal and Finance, Information Technology. This is a true up of our federal funding mix. It's not an expansion of our expenses. Over the last several years, we've had more state investments, as you all know, and with that, we also, within our administration division, our federal funding mix is also decreasing. So this is a true up. Basically, over the last 5 years, we did an analysis, and based on what we're bringing in federal revenue and what we have in our federal budget, there's a gap. So it's just changing that federal revenue over and reallocating it over to the state appropriation. And with that, I'll ask Troy Haley to give us an update on the last two cost increases.
Thank you, Andy. Troy Haley, Bureau of Workers' Compensation. We have two items this year, $72,000 for replacement of 1/3 of our computer inventory, laptops. We've got quite a few folks either working remotely or in some sort of hybrid fashion. So this will replace about 1/3 of our inventory. And $20,000 for the uninsured employer fund. That is a fund of money that is paid, it's collected from penalties that we assess against uninsured employers. And we can pay $20,000 in temp benefits, $20,000 in medical. And if our administration bill passes this year, which it's well on its way, we'll be able to pay $20,000 in temp benefits to an injured worker whose employer broke the law and did not carry workers' comp insurance coverage. So thank you.
Madam Chair, this is our budget. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I do have questioners. Representative Lynn, you are recognized first on my list.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us here today, and congratulations on your new position. In the FY 22-23 budget, appropriated a total of $9 million, $6.7 million of which was recurring, in funding for technology to enable county jail access to virtual education and workforce development tools to improve reentry and reduce recidivism. Please provide an update of this initiative. Are all county jails participating at this time? Were there any issues with implementation of this program? A lot of other questions here. How much has been spent to date? And how does the department plan to track the success of this program moving forward?
Thank you for your questions, Representative Lynn. That was to cover the tablets that I mentioned in my introductory remarks. There were roughly 10,000 to be purchased. 6,343 of those to date have been deployed to the county jails. We did have some of those jails that lack the infrastructure versus the cellular technology. So we're working with our partners to have funding to support them. We do know the ones at Middle Tennessee have not been ordered. Am I correct? I'm looking at my CFO here. I think that's the balance of the tablets is in the Middle Tennessee area, but we really want to focus on the rural communities first to get those tablets out. We do have built-in reporting for those, so we'll be able to track the reporting, the number of individuals that are actually using them and how they're using them. And we'll also be able to, once they leave the county jails, that'll port over to our system, so we'll be able to track them even when they're outside of the jails and not utilizing the tablets. As far as costs, I'm going to look to my CFO for that.
Yes, so far, we have purchased over $5 million worth of tablets and also bringing on all the curriculum online that they're able to access from the county jails. So we've made a lot of good progress. We got the contract in place. We went to FRC with that contract. So everything's moving along really well. As Commissioner mentioned, the Middle Tennessee tablets were just purchased within the last couple of weeks. Those are in the process of being deployed. We did it in a stage. We went from West Tennessee, then East Tennessee, and now we're working with Middle Tennessee. So we're starting to see those students come online.
And I know that you're just getting the program up and running, but will there be metrics so that you said we'll be able to track these people after they've no longer in jail and no longer using those tablets? How are we going to determine if this is a successful program, if it's worth the money and the time that's gone into it?
So some of the metrics that we've looked at, Madam Chair, is one, obviously the number of individuals that are engaged in the training that's on the tablets. Secondly, we'll be able to track the number of individuals that have had a touch by our department and go to work. And then also we're looking at wages, which are the things that we track for all of our participants. So participation is one thing in enrollment, but also looking at the number of individuals that actually go to work as a result of some interaction with our department. The goal long-term is to also expand the program so that we can actually do technical instruction on the tablets. So if there is job readiness training that's occurring, they'll be able to do that through distance education. All of those metrics will be able to be tracked, not just the hours that they're spending on the tablets, but also we'll be looking at our wage data to know if they've gone to work and at what wages they're being employed. And that information is readily available through the tablets, and we can share that in frequent updates with our legislative liaison.
And again, I know it's early in the program, so you may not have good numbers on this yet, but I don't know how to term this. What kind of destruction factor are we looking at? Are you having to replace these tablets, or are inmates taking care of them? How's that working?
So throughout our pilot program, when we had the initial lot of tablets that went out, that was one of the things that we looked at before we wanted to go and scale the program across the state. And we didn't have any tablets that needed to be replaced. They're fairly durable. Again, it's still early in. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but so far, we based it off of our pilot. We did not have those issues. So we're going to continue to monitor that as well. As far as the curriculum, it's built to be ever evolving. So as our needs change for workforce development and training, we have the ability to own the curriculum and can work with the vendor to modify that based on needs. For example, one of the things that we think will be paramount is giving introductory training for construction trades, for example, as we need more and more people to build. Those are things we'll be able to go in and modify in the tablet to be able to make sure that's in their hands. And so we'll continue to look for that, and we'll be happy to report any instances as we move along.
And how do we determine, is it voluntary? What kind of screening process do we use in order to get the people involved in the program?
So we've been working to really make sure that I know our team has met with the Sheriff's Association on multiple occasions and really leveraging the knowledge we've gotten from sheriffs that implemented the program early to really work with the county jail staff on how they actually offer the program. We want to be very careful because we understand that whereas we would like to see, an expanded use of this, we don't want it to interfere with what it takes to actually manage a county jail and those that are incarcerated. So we've said those that are motivated and would like to take part, we want to make it a very seamless and easy process, but we don't want to force it on anyone. Quite frankly, if it's going to cause any kind of behavior interruptions or things of that nature. And so right now we want to put that in the hands of those that are managing the jail so that they can make the best determination and referrals of who uses it.
All right. Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to talk about the American Job Centers that was created in the last budget. I think there was a little over $200,000 that was put in that budget for creating positions for that. Can you talk to us, provide an update on that program? Talk about if all 4 of those positions created have been filled and have all of the job centers been established?
So those 4 positions, they all have been filled. They were filled relatively quick. We were excited about that. So those were filled fast. Their job really is to work to be a liaison between the established American Job Centers, but they're able to actually go in and work with county jails, TDOC officials as an extension of our centers. So they're actually not, so those 4 positions are really an extension of the American Job Center staff that are in their respective areas across the state, really to take those services to individuals that need them behind walls. So it didn't necessarily establish the centers, but it did establish a person who's an extension of that center to work with correction staff. And so they were hired. And those 4 folks are off and running, and they have their respective geographic areas in which they're providing services.
Representative Barrett.
Do you have an idea of how many people have been served statewide through the program so far?
I can get those numbers for you.
Okay.
I'd be happy to share those.
And
Representative Barrett.
And then additional follow-up, how does the department or how will the department track the success of that program? Are participants tracked once they leave the prison as well? Is there follow-up done with the program?
Yes, so our goal is to have these individuals registered in our system so that we can track them. Again, our metrics, our three main metrics are they being served? What programs they're getting served under? The second one is, are they going to work? And then the third component of that is, what are the associated wages with the program? Because again, it's important to get some individuals what we call survival jobs, but the goal is to actually get them careers and into training that's going to actually yield a self-sustaining wage. So those are the three metrics. And so we're happy to get that information and provide it. It's something that's tracked for everyone who engages with our American Job Center.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. My question relates to the unemployment insurance and the tax benefit system. And by the way, 18 months ago or so, y'all are inundated. I know you weren't here during that time, but I'm not having calls about unemployment issues. So we're thankful for that and learned a lot during that process. You all received $61 million in federal COVID funding for a new customized UI benefit system in November of 2021. So my question relates to that. What is the status of this new UI benefit system, and how much of the federal money has been spent? And then finally, is the project on time and on budget?
I'm going to yield to my CFO on that update, and then we'll talk about the timeline of the project.
Good deal. Thank you.
Sure. So yes, $61 million was appropriated in ARPA funding for this project. The contract was effective in September with the benefit system. We're still in the definition phase with a vendor right now. We've spent about $1 million because within that budget as well is SDS, as well as our labor staff that are, they're allocated to that project as well. So that money is really being spent on that. The payments will come as milestones are reached, and so it's backloaded. So as the definition phase is over and the analysis phase is over, once those projects are completed, then we'll be able to make payment on those phases. So the overall contract was about $24 million, and we had $8 million budgeted for that 3-year period as well. So with that too, we have the tax system that is out in RFP right now. And I believe the notice of intent to award is a couple months out, but we're starting to get those question and answers from the vendors and going through the proposals and the scoring for that system.
Good. And I probably should have asked this prior to, what's the difference between the old system and this new system? What exactly does it do, or what is it, the new UI benefit system?
So the new system essentially allows us to have a system that can withstand the onslaught. And that's the goal. I think the primary difference is that this is a much more interactive and user-friendly system. One of the things that was very challenging during the pandemic was that with our old system, it had difficulty withstanding to the demand of the number of individuals that were trying to not just file their claim, but find out the status of their claim. Now, in fairness, I don't think there was any system across the country that could withstand that kind of onslaught. But for us, we need a system that is communicative. So individuals don't have to call your office to find out what the status of their claim is. We wanted this system to be designed to be extremely interactive and responsive and intuitive. So an individual will know, if I submitted all of my paperwork, here's my status, here's when I can expect my claim to be approved or denied, and it would take them through the process. And so one of the lessons learned for us was we needed to expand on what we call the plain language approach. We were talking and speaking in things that was very state language, very unemployment related language, and we could not expect the general public to understand what we were asking. All of that changes in our system. So that's the goal for this, is to be very intuitive. We are starting, as our CFO mentioned, the definition stage, which is critically important. So when we say what something means, that translates to the public we serve. The goal is that all of those things are on track, on time, and so we're marching ahead. So we feel good about where things are, but it's early. We got a lot of work to do. It is important to note that this system will be tested by the public that needs it. And we know that that's a very important aspect, not just for the general public, but employers will also have a chance to test it as well, so that we can make sure it can actually meet the expectations. We hope we don't have another global pandemic. or significant recession, but it's important for us to make sure that the end users have an opportunity to weigh in. We don't want to be so far down the road that we can't back up and punt if we need to. And so that testing phase will be very important.
Good deal. Thank you for that.
You're
I really
welcome.
appreciate you all being here and explaining that new program. Looks like it's going to be hopefully a great help to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that motion. None of us want to go through what we went through during the pandemic when we became the ex officio office of the Department of Labor. So we are looking forward to a robust program. And I think I'm glad to hear you talk about the end users, including the employers. That was another frustration that I think a lot of my colleagues and I dealt with. It wasn't just the people trying to get the unemployment. It was also those employers who were trying to provide the information. And it was just such a sticky wicket that they had a lot of difficulty being able to do that in a timely manner. So we look forward to bigger and better, and we hope that we don't need you to go over to TennCare and help them with the re-enrollment numbers. That is a fear I think some of us have here, that as we go through that process, TennCare, we're getting some PTSD, little. I'm starting to get really nervous about what might happen with that. So, Representative Garrett, did you have a follow-up?
Just one follow-up. I noticed the Deputy Commissioner, Dwayne Scott there, he's from Sumner County, so I just wanted to give him a shout out and say, welcome, thank you for being here. I just now noticed you were sitting there, sir, so I wanted to make sure we recognized Sumner County in there. Thank you.
Welcome to all, no matter what county they're from. We're all Tennesseans and glad to have you here. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady. So just a couple questions about some funding from last year. So we Department of Commerce and Insurance received $1.5 million to essentially set up an online portal to assist local law enforcement agencies, right, to post and to find job applicants. And so they were hoping, I think Tennessee TDCI was hoping to maybe use the Jobs for TN website framework for this online portal. That ultimately did not work, and so they're creating their own portal, excuse me. And so our question is, are there any other agencies which have expressed interest in utilizing the Jobs for TN website for specialized hiring portals? So that's the first one. And then also after that, if you can answer, do you feel like that the current website, is it easy to use for candidates, or should it be tweaked, or have you had any positive or negative feedback? If you could answer both of those, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we talked to our partners at Commerce and Insurance quite at length. We had some issues with our contract that required us to go before FRC. So unfortunately, they were not able to back into our using Jobs for TN portal for that reason. But we have been talking about ways that we can leverage that. And I think the plan is they will use that platform. I think Jobs for TN, when it was created, which was back in 2014, I think the system at the time was really state of the art. It was one of the best workforce systems perhaps in the country. We recognize that the needs of Tennesseans and workforce development in general has shifted. And so our goal is at some point is to seek your support and go in the market to see if there's a system out there that can meet the needs of multiple agencies, because obviously, as you just referenced, it's not enough for labor to be satisfied with the system, but it needs to be a workforce platform that really can take care of all of the needs across the enterprise, whether it's a specialized workforce development need or not. So to answer that question is, we are looking internally at what an ideal system needs to be for us. I think unemployment insurance had us thinking about all of our systems, quite frankly, and how well they can communicate and talk to each other, and how we can make our front end systems very seamless for the customer. We find that some folks have ease of access, but I will tell you that's not the case for everyone. So our goal, particularly with this system, is also for the employers. Again, we want them to have ease of access for recruitment, so they're not having to enter multiple vacancies into the system. And that's some feedback that we've gotten. So our goal is that we'll continue to really look at our systems and see what we need. I think Jobs for TN has performed successfully in the past, but we know just with needs in the future, we may have to rethink that. You're welcome.
Chairman Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are going to focus on the Summer Youth Employment Program in Tennessee Strong Families. As a person who was employed rather early in life, I appreciate getting to know what works for me and what doesn't. I think that's beneficial to people from across Tennessee. I see that there's a $15 million non-recurring funding to expand the Summer Youth Employment Program. And how will this funding expand the program? Will it make any expansion geographically in the state?
Thank you for your question. I think for us, the department has done summer youth in the past, but with the declination of federal funding, we just didn't have the money to do it. I think the last time we ran the program was a few years ago for $2.5 million. We were able to serve some, but definitely not the need that we have. So this $15 million essentially allows us the opportunity to work with Department of Education for those youth that are in career and technical education programs, working with DCS for those that are aging out of foster care, and allow them to really put their hands to work. The goal is that if we can get the program started again and we can get kids into an exploration mode with their jobs, we can then make an assessment of, does this program now become a fabric of and is baked into what we do each and every summer? What I do know is that we have to do something because, we all want to see our youth engage in something meaningful. I remember summer youth from my days, and I won't date myself, but those programs are very helpful. So we plan to partner, particularly with the high need group that we talked about, to help them get to work. But we want to use a very structured program to be able to do that so that we're not creating barriers for those children. So if they're already working with DCS, and their youth that are aging out, we can partner alongside them and actually find slots for them. The funding actually will be dispersed to our non-local boards and will really be based on a proposal model. So they will work with all of their local stakeholders and say how many youth how much funding they need to for every qualified youth to be enrolled in a summer placement program. And that funding will be dispersed through them. We already have the mechanism we release workforce funding through them anyway. And so that part's very seamless and it can get the money out to them very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you for your presence here. You mentioned the new system and that it would be tested. Just wanted to know what that would look like and what time frame we're looking at for that.
So we're still early on. We'll have a better timeline for you as a couple of months go by. That definition part that our CFO mentioned is a very important part to get the base configuration. I'm happy to update this body on when that time frame will be. What it will really look like is that employers will get a chance to mimic what they would do in the system in real time. So if they were doing a partial, if they were responding to any appeal, anything that we would do for them, they would actually get to simulate those in real time. The goal is to make sure nothing breaks, but also to get feedback to say, well, maybe it's simpler if these 3 steps can be cut out. So that's really what that testing phase will look like. And it will look the same for claimants as well when they're testing the system.
Representative Love.
Thank you. Just one follow-up. In working through that, how will, 'cause I know you can't have all the employers in the state.
Correct.
So how will you be selecting a sample of employers and a sample of potential employees? That's, if you can answer that.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So we're working with, we'll be partnering with Bradley Jackson with the Tennessee Chamber, and also we have a UI advisory council that consists of employers. We've actually kind of put this out to them months ago and said we're going to be looking for employers. And so we'll actually take it on a volunteer basis like those, particularly where after different sizes of businesses, small, medium, large businesses. And we know those that have done a lot of work with us in the past, particularly around partials. So we'll put a particular call out for those businesses, but we'll kind of take it on a volunteer basis. And then we'll kind of cap, obviously, when we look at what gets to be too much. But we do want to have a good sampling to make sure that the system doesn't work for some and not others. But as we firm that up, we're happy to follow back up just so all that information is very transparent.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't have any other questioners on my list. So when you are at the end of a session that started at 9 this morning and running into lunchtime, people's attention gets diverted. So, but we do appreciate again all that you do and all that your organization does. I think workforce is probably the single largest challenge we have in our state right now. And it's not just in our state, but certainly Tennessee, with the number of people that have coming in. We're very fortunate that we have companies and individuals who'd like to relocate here. But in order to do that, we're going to have folks to fill jobs and provide support services. And that pool is getting smaller. So we have to make sure that we're utilizing every available body and mind that we can. So I think it's forward thinking of the legislature and the governor and you all to be looking at sort of non-traditional places to get folks to fill those jobs by training people who would otherwise just be killing time in our prisons and jail cells, and anything else that we can do to get people who may have been they're no longer considered unemployed. I still think there's a lot of people out there who just quit looking for whatever reason. They sort of checked out of the workforce during the pandemic. I think there's an opportunity to get some of those folks back in, and you all are, the work that you do may help us do that. But again, thanks for being here. To my colleagues, the few, the proud, the strong remnant, thank you for hanging in, and we will have our committee meeting tomorrow, and we will continue with budget hearings after we conduct the calendar business at that time. So with that, we're back in session, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. It's non-debatable. We are
Thank you, Madam Chair.
adjourned.